All right, everybody. Hey, everybody. It's welcome to the 10-4 Tavern. It is 7:20, 15 minutes late for the 10-4 Tavern on December 2nd, 2025, the year of our Lord. Apologies for the technical difficulties. We tried to launch the live stream and StreamYard kicked us out. So we know we're going to have a low attendance on the front end, but we'll hopefully get a lot of replays later. We have a great episode tonight for you. Pete Forcelli, my partner in life and crime, and going back many, many years, is on vacation, cruising around the Caribbean on some boat somewhere. He's probably wearing a thong on the beach somewhere. I know he loves tequila. I'm doing mezcal tonight, so he's probably knocking back a tequila. So we miss you, Pete. Mike Marino, Deputy Chief, Brooklyn North, many commands. You all probably know him. If you don't, he'll reintroduce himself. And then tonight we have a very special guest, a really dear friend, going back to the Transit Police back in the 80s with me, pre-merger. Then we went through the merger. When I was in the Decoy Squad, John was the sergeant in the Decoy Squad. Well, he had moved on to Central Robbery. I think you were at that time. But he trained the new incoming Decoy Squad members into the career path. So we go back that far, and then we reconnected after the merger in Brooklyn North. So we have a great episode tonight. But before we get into John and his career, I'm going to let Mike introduce himself as the guest host. I'll let John introduce him, and then I have a little bit of topical conversation that we could talk to tonight. So everybody, welcome to the 10-4 Tavern. What are you guys drinking?
Oh, I'm drinking Coke. but after the debacle that we had, I may actually excuse myself and get a real drink now to relieve the stress.
Well, Pete's on vacation. I'm drinking a mezcal. Like I said, John, you got iced tea. Mike's got Coca-Cola tonight. Again, this is the tavern. Anyone who's been a cop is always reshaped up after a big caper. And we've been to the bar, but we don't encourage over drinking, but we always enjoy a nice cocktail. And if you do have a problem, please seek help. It's not okay to not admit you're okay, but it's Pete's got the saying down. If you need help, please reach out. We're responsible drinkers, never drink and drive. Don't overindulge, but we enjoy a nice cocktail from time to time. But that being said, so Mike, again, please reintroduce yourself for those who might not know us, because we do have a slightly national presence, and then we'll introduce John, the guest tonight.
I'm Mike Marino. I did 35 years. I retired as a deputy chief. I worked my way up through the ranks on patrol precincts. I never had the privilege of working in the squad, although I did work with some great guys who are with us tonight. He taught me everything about the squad. I went through precincts, and I wound up in boroughs, in charge of a number of precincts. And I did 35 years, and they decided to put me off because of injuries and some 9/11 issues.
All right, and thanks, Mike. I really appreciate it. And we're going to have a really good spirited conversation, I would suggest, tonight. But with that, John Cornicello, Transit Police, came on in the early 80s, went through, I think, Harlem University. You'll talk a little bit about that. And then the merger, all the good things with the Transit Police and the really good things. And Jack Maple, everyone knows who Jack Maple is and what a pioneer he was, and all of us who learned from Jack Maple. And then our careers going through the merger, what that felt like. It was probably good for you, probably not good for you. At the end, for me, it was great. I resisted it at the beginning, but I embraced it. And then we'll get to Brooklyn North and the Brooklyn North Homicide and all those things. So, John, welcome.
Thank you. Good to be here.
Oh, man. So before we get into John and him growing up and why he became a cop and how he became a cop and where he became a cop, I'm going to say that we've got 59 attendees already on. So considering the technical snafu, I think we're doing pretty good. So John McCarry, thank you for fixing our business on the back end. I don't know what happened. We've done 23 episodes. Everything worked out great. But I want to talk about something that happened today when I was talking to a retired lieutenant colonel from the New Jersey State Police. We were on the phone, and he said to me, crime fighting appears to be no longer a priority. And we were specifically talking about Spokane, Washington, and they have a 93% clearance rate, and we thought that was an anomaly. And they're doing a really good job in Spokane for anyone who's interested and knows anything about Washington State. They've had about 20 homicides, give or take, and they've had about 100 non-fatal shootings. So I equated that to one of the busier precincts in New York right now. And they have a 93% clearance rate on the homicides, and they're dealing with a 63 non-fatal shootings to 109 for the, looks like they're going to finish up the end of the year with around 110 or 111. And I said, that's like a precinct. And I said, any precinct, any detective squad, John, you'll appreciate this, would appreciate a 93% clearance rate. And then we broke down the numbers, and we were trying to figure out, like, well, is it previous years cleared, victims known to each other, is it gang related? We tried to break down the crime, and 93% is great, no matter what you're looking at. The national average, I guess, John, when you and I were doing, it was probably 67, 70%. We would always love to high 80s, high 90s, 100% or 110% clearance rate from previous years were fantastic. However, what was really interesting to me when Ray Guidetti, the lieutenant colonel from the New Jersey State Police, said to me, crime fighting is no longer a priority, or at least we hope it is, but we worry that it's not. I wanted to bring everyone's attention to a thought leadership paper that came out of the University of Virginia. And in their own voices, they talked about gun crime and what state and community leaders can do and are doing to meet the challenge of gun crimes throughout the country. And then I commented, after reading this authoritative paper, that I don't see any explicit or sustained discussion of intrusive or proactive, and intrusive, Eric Dim, that's for you, proactive policing, enhanced prosecution, strict bail practices, or tougher sentencing guidelines. And the findings and recommendations, those tools are the last resort and, frankly, the final line of defense when everything upstream fails. It's surprising that this report did not even acknowledge that side of the equation, because real-world gun violence reduction usually requires both strong community support systems and credible, consistent accountability. And do you know I posted that on social media, and the chief of police who posted this authoritative paper deleted my comment?
Well, you know what?
With that, I'm going to defer to you, Mike, because you work both sides. You saw the detective work from the precinct commander and the borough commander perspective, but you also were entrenched with the community. So I'm going to go to you, Mike, first, and then John. And then
I'm going to tell you, I got to tell you, number one, you're talking about Virginia. So that's a funny state. That's an anomaly to me,
Oh, yeah, sure.
It's like, we're very progressive, but don't touch our guns. I mean, it's kind of strange, Virginia. But what you're right, and what you don't see in there is you don't see any importance about the proactive stuff on the street. So if you remember back to a time, I would say let's go back to, say, the crack epidemics in the, say, the mid 80s. I was a sergeant in the 7-3. Okay. And I remember homicide number 43 in the 7-3 was April. It was a housing cop. He was doing Anthony. I can't for the life of me. I'm sorry, I can't remember his last name, and I should. McLean, Anthony McLean. Yeah. He was doing a vertical, and he came up to some guys, and he got whacked. And this was April, and he was homicide number 43 in April. And because what was happening then, it almost seemed like the drug dealers were getting all their business out of the way and establishing territory so they could do business in the summer. I think we wound up with 80 some odd that year in April, and a lot of shootings. I remember the worst year in this 28 when I was there was 123 and 3,000 armed robberies, and all of a sudden we started doing, as you call, the proactive stuff, a lot of things with the community. a lot of proactive policing, the broken windows theory, if you will, and all of a sudden we were having thousands of homicides a year. All of a sudden they were dropping down 300, 200 to shootings. And the 7.5, John, what was their worst year? 125 or something one year?
See, more than that.
Was it?
Yeah, it's around 150. Yeah.
I mean, what they say, right? Give us 10 minutes, we'll give you a homicide.
Yeah.
That was a T-shirt, right?
Yeah,
So-
yeah, that's when you were allowed to do that. Yeah.
We've already proved, we've already proved this out. And then, of course, you guys were into the, you came into the mix so heavy. I remember we would do all the 250s. You guys would run all the 250s. And who got locked up with who, and who was here, and who didn't belong here, and this guy's wanted for this. Everybody, we incorporated narcotics. They'd work, with our SNU teams. Narcotics, if they were off Sunday, Monday, our SNUs were off Friday, Saturday. Talk with each other. They exchanged where they were going to be. You got to be out there proactive. You got to be touching people. You know what? If you take a gun off the street, it can't shoot somebody. You wait until after somebody's shot. You dropped the ball already, didn't you? You can't stop them all.
You know what a lot of these academics don't take into consideration is the impact it has on the community. And what is the community looking for? If you talk to the person on the street that can't walk out the front door to buy a gallon of milk after dark, they want to see proactive policing. All this other stuff, the social, interactors and all, that all sounds nice. But if you can't feel safe walking out your door, then we're not doing what we should be doing. And that always seems to get forgotten when people want to talk about how, intrusive policing and that whole terminology.
Well,
John, they didn't forget. Hold on, Mike, please. They didn't forget. They're lying to you.
Yeah.
They're lying. They know full well that this is the way to do it. We saw it from 92 with 2,200 homicides to the late 90s when we went down to the 500, under 1,000, and got to the 300. They know they're lying. They didn't forget, John. They're lying.
Mike,
they want
Tommy,
chaos.
We saw it. How many times did we go into the Kingsborough houses, into the Cypress houses, into the Albany houses, and you'd go into some grandmother's apartment. It was spotless. You could eat off the floor. And she was afraid to leave her apartment for being robbed or attacked. And you have to say to yourself, those are the people that we need to be reactive for. And when we're not, then there's something that's lacking.
Well, there's a little elephant in the room with that, though, John, because I found that a lot all through the ranks, but particularly when I became precinct commander. She'd be out walking, and all of a sudden, maybe it's a Saturday or a Sunday, and maybe you're out on Franklin Avenue, you're tossing a guy who's a drug dealer. Yeah. And here's a nice little lady coming from church. Mm-hmm. You're just stopping him because he's black, and you have to find ways to get around that too. I want what you want. See. You want your property values to go up. I want my precinct to be quiet. I want to sit at my desk, get my feet up, having a drink of whatever Tommy's drinking right now, right? And you really have to talk. You have to be honest about that. You have to be honest about we all have, different prejudices that we have to admit them. We have to get past them. We want the same things. We're working together. You even got to get your cops on board with that too. Yeah. Remember the picture we had, John, on the side of the precinct with the black hand and the white hand shaking. Mm-hmm. Remember those brothers did it? We were the first precinct that had that.
Yeah.
Remember the statue we had painted on the wall, like that statue behind Tommy with the cop and the kid?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
A little factoid for you. The kid that posed for that was Fiorello LaGuardia's grandson, That's
I have a story about that statue we'll talk about later. But yeah. You're right. You're absolutely right.
Don't tell that story about what you did with that. But we had that painting on the wall. And remember, it was a little black kid. Remember? It was a little black kid because Gary Lamite said they're painting it, Gary was a SNU sergeant first.
Yeah.
And he said, why don't you
Yeah.
make it a black kid? Because it's kind of a black community. So that's a good idea. And you know what? The community loved it. Little gestures like that, where you make everybody kind of, we're all responsible for each other. We all look out for each other. We all want the same things. We take care of each other. The rest of the world, maybe they suck, but in our world, we're all together.
Yeah.
And you got to include them. But that's a hard thing to do, because the first thing people do today, look what's going on in Minnesota with Tim Walsh, right? And all that money that went out, $1 billion. And they said he knew it. And he was afraid, because the minute that they pushed back, they were accused of being racists. And he got afraid of it. And he didn't want to alienate. Somali community is a huge community in Minnesota. He didn't want to lose those votes either. So he let it happen. Instead of saying, we're not racist, we're realists. If the numbers tell you to go after this, that's what the numbers call for. That's what you go after. I'm not a racist. I'm a realist.
Yep. All right, so we're going down a rabbit hole, which is, and you're right, the Waltz, Minnesota, Minneapolis, they said we're going to burn this down, we're going to rebuild it, and they never rebuilt it. So it's a lie. Again, it's another lie. However, let's talk about across the country real quick, and then we're going to get into John's career, and that's what we're here for, and especially with you, Mike, because you worked with all three of us. We all work together. And we'll talk about John Garrity too, because even though he won't show up here, we're going to talk about him anyway. Has law enforcement across the country given up policing, or can we see that pendulum swing back where people will say, no, please embrace your cops, let them loose, be proactive, and we'll support them. It's an ugly game. It's contact sport. Sometimes things go sideways, but gosh, please.
I've seen it.
To get the worst offenders off the street.
I've seen it swing. I've seen it swing since '79, back and forth. I think that we're kind of reflective of what's, I used to think anyway, until a couple of years ago, that we were very reflective of what society wants. If society said, go out there and break heads, we go out and break heads because it's allowed. If they say we don't want you to, the powers that be, we're all very sensitive to that. Now I don't know. How do you reconcile yourself with the fact that I'm watching, I guess it's Portland or Seattle, which one, I forget which, and the illegals are running away from ICE, and they're running behind the police officers who are shielding them from ICE. I mean, even if you're being told not to do anything, step aside. Because honestly, technically, yes, Lieutenant Garrity. Honestly, technically,
John Garrity.
ICE could arrest them. ICE could arrest them for impeding a federal officer, and that'd be ugly.
They should.
But
they should be. But so John and Eric talked about this on yesterday morning. The chaos. They want chaos. We think the leaks are coming from all places, even the federal government. People are leaking at the federal level and in headquarters, and they're creating chaos. And somebody's going to die. And as someone who lives in Charlottesville with the Unite the Right rally, where President Trump said there are good people on both sides, and they misquoted him for that. Heather Heyer was killed and run over by some goofball in a Dodge Challenger, and she got killed. And when you create chaos intentionally, which is what they're doing, people are going to die. They're going to get hurt, and they did the other night. I was on the phone with your son when that happened. Yeah, because he's in the mix. He's in the mix in DC. Yeah. So thanks. He appreciates your reaching out to him, Chief, because his father may have knowledge, but he's just his dad. It's just like when I was teaching him Little League baseball, right? Yeah. And Yubi Perez, God rest his soul, my best friend in the world who died at IACP 2012, the best baseball guy and best baseball Little League manager ever. When Dad taught him where to stand and how to scoop up a ground ball, it didn't matter. But when Yubi said it, it meant everything. And that's what you are to him in policing. So thank you for that. But we're way into this, and before we get into John's career, this is the 10-4 Tavern, right? And you never know who's going to stroll into the 10-4 Tavern. And here he is walking in, one of the greatest DEA union members of all time, Georgie Farback. Georgie Farback, how are you, George? Welcome to the tavern.
I walk in here, and there's 3 people in my 35-year career that I've called boss, and I don't throw that term out very easily. Boss to me means you have to be well respected by your men. You have to take care of your men. And here's 3 people at some point that I called boss, whether working for them or working with them. So that's pretty impressive to have that in the 10-4 Tavern at one time.
Thanks.
Well, George, thanks for coming in. Before we get into John's career, you worked with me in a 7-9. You worked with John in Homicide. You worked with Chief Marino across the board in the borough in numerous places. Like, just share your thoughts, and we'll let you go back to your cocktailing, and then we'll get into John's career.
Well, so just an interesting point with me leaving the 7-9 and going to the Homicide Squad. I had been asked, I don't want to sound like an ass here, but numerous times if I wanted to go to Homicide, and Kevin and I had a nice thing going, we'd clear some old murders and we'd do what we had to do. And there was a lieutenant in the Homicide Squad prior to Lieutenant Cornicello that I did not want to work for. So I waited until the opportunity arose that a new lieutenant came in, someone that I felt that I easily could work for. And that was the time when I decided to move over to the Homicide Squad, to Kevin's dismay. But so for me,
I believe you're still showing up. You're probably still being signed into the 7-9 Squad today.
I still am, and there is still that tag, Hansi 3 in 2003. So yes,
it's so good.
So they're still signing me in and out at the 7-9 because Kevin wanted me to do that. But actually, going to the Homicide Squad worked out great. You had Tommy, had you left the 7-9 when I left, or you had already gone? Right?
I was still there.
You were still there. Okay.
Yeah.
So I know you begged me to stay, but
I did. I begged
but,
you to stay.
Hey, I had to do what I had to do.
I had no control.
I had no control. But yeah, I mean, and overhearing some of the conversation while I was standing at the bar, not being introduced, I remember in the 7-9 going to some of these community board meetings when street crime was doing their thing. And let me tell you something, a lot of the people in the projects, a lot of people that showed up at 7-9 board meetings didn't really have a problem with street crime pulling up on a corner and tossing 10 to 12 guys and coming up with 3 gun collars. A lot of those older women that were like, you know what, I feel a lot safer with these guys out there. I can go get my gallon of milk. I can let my kid go out to the playground, in the middle of the Tompkins houses. And they felt comfortable with what we were doing. Now, different story.
Yeah. Absolutely true.
Well, I'll tell you, I'll tell you that Mike, Chief, you were talking about stories, and John was talking about stories. I remember conversations in the Tompkins houses of moms telling us that we teach our children to dive into the bathtubs when we hear shots fired. That is a really sad place to be. And anyone who thinks that intrusive, proactive police officers cannot be empathetic at the same time has never lived real, true police work. They have not been there. If they think that is true, they have never been on the street really, really digging in and cleaning this stuff up. It's terrible. And, we're going to get into a lot of work, and there's a lot of murder work in this and a lot of homicides that we're going to get into. But George, you're right. And what's really funny is the person that kept signing you in all the time, who we all know is larger than life and is probably one of the better detectives that we've ever met. I always pause to say one of the best detectives because there's so many great ones. But if you talk to him, he would be here today and you would think he was the most offensive guy in the world. But at the same time, I would also say he's probably the least racist person I've ever met in my life.
Yeah,
like,
I agree.
Does he not love everybody?
Yes, he does love everybody.
But is he also not censored?
No, he has. There's no filter.
Right. So that's why nobody understands us. That's why I'm trying to say nobody understands what we do and how we do it. Because the same guy who you would think is the worst, most offensive person is probably, in my lifetime, the least offensive.
Yes, I agree.
You know what I mean? And I had this conversation. So that's a lot. So with that, John, any final thoughts going around the room on this topic?
Just before you do that, so I don't forget. So we're working for Lieutenant Cornicello, and I don't know if we were doing a turnaround, if it was first day tour, whatever, and a cop gets shot in the 7.5. And Lieutenant Cornicello probably called my cell phone and said, George, there's a cop shot in the 7.5. I need you guys to go over there. And the team at the time was Tony Vidge, myself, Matty Collins, Chris Gandol, and I think Seamus was our sergeant. Mike McWilliams was on terminal. And so the boss called me, said, George, I need you guys. I said, boss, we're already here. We got here an hour ago because Seamus found out, called us all, and we all went right to the 7.5. Yeah. And the compliment that the boss threw out to me was, you know what, I always rest a little easier when I know you guys are working. And it's not taking anything away from the other teams, because the other teams were great too. But it was such a compliment to my team, to Matty, Chris, Seamus, Tony, you know, that he knew that we would be there. And if the shit hit the fan, we were going to be there to take care of it.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yep.
So, so George, I really appreciate that comment. And I will tell you, as a squad commander, a sergeant in 7.7, but a squad commander in 7.9, and when everything is on your plate and you have to answer to the PC and the chief of Ds, and we talked about that with Bobby Boyce about the pressure coming down from Lieutenant King. Remember when Lieutenant King used to call us, John? Remember? And they wanted the updates and all that kind of stuff. You know, I always knew that even the teams that were less talented or less enthusiastic, the squad itself would always rally and never let that happen. And Stevie Camille walked into my office when he got bounced from homicide from that lieutenant that you did not want to work for, George. And Stevie Camille got bounced with 35 years back to the 7.9 squad. And he waved the 61 in my face. He waved the 61 in my face and literally almost hit me in the nose with it. And he said, don't you worry, Lieutenant. Someone's going to answer for this. And all I said was, I'm not even worried about shit. I'm not even worried about shit. But listen, we got John Cornicello's career to get into tonight. So, George, you can go talk to your friends in the back of the bar, in the back of the 10-4 Tavern, and we'll pull you in at the end tonight. And if you're still here, we'll bring you back in to wrap up. And if you're not, we'll see you the next time. We'll see you the next Brooklyn North guest.
Grab a plate of wings on the way back, George.
Yeah, I'm a drunk. I'll be in the bar, so just call me in.
Crispy wings at Teddy's.
There you go.
Yeah, right.
All right, John, this is your time, buddy.
Well, we've talked a lot about some of the problems in policing and in the world. And like we always do, we always try to solve them. You know, just to bounce off of something you just said or that George mentioned before, I had a sign hanging up in I put it up in the 7.7 squad first, and I carried it with me to the 7.5 and to homicide. And it was just a basic sign with a detective standing there, and it said, what the 7 said was 7.7 squad, we make things right. And that's what detectives did. And, you know, whatever problems were going on in the precinct, they come up to the squad and go, you know, I always like, I'm veering a little bit off, but when they would come up, right, Mike, you'll appreciate this. And they come up to the squad and they go, hey, boss, we got a problem. We have we have an escaped prisoner. And I'd say, we have a problem? Sounds like you got a big problem. We're going to try to make it right, though, you know. But that's what we do. So anyway, you want me to just start from?
Yeah, John. Just a comment on that.
Yeah,
I received countless phone calls in the middle of the night on the cell phone when they finally issued us cell phones. And they said, Lou, we got a problem. Lou, we got a problem. And I go, which one of our people are hurt or dead?
Yeah.
And they said, none. And I said, we don't have a problem. We're just going to do what we do.
Yeah, right. That's right. You know,
we don't have a problem. We're just going to work it. We're just going to do it.
Yep.
All right. So, John. So, I want to get to some comments before, because there's some really great ones. And I have to go back. Some really good one. Here's the one I want.
Yeah.
Lieutenant C has good genes. His dad, Fred Cornicello, Queens Homicide, under Lieutenant Dan Kelly. John, we're going to get into some of your influencers, but with this comment, where did you grow up? Why did you become a cop?
So I grew up on Long Island. I grew up in Limbrook. And why did I become a cop? My father was a cop, so I have a couple of influences from the beginning, you know, from early on. And I'm going to tell you that basically all I ever wanted to do was to be a cop, but even more than that, be a detective. You know, growing up, you know, my father was a cop in the 7-9 precinct. He came on the job in 1956, a year before I was born. And, you know, when other kids were reading comic books, you know, like Marvel comic books and Spider-Man, I was reading Spring 3100, you know, the NYPD magazine that my father would bring home. And I would go through Spring 3100 and I'd look through the precinct reports and pick out names that I knew from, you know, through him and through the job. Yeah. So I have a box, Mike, of that go back to the 50s and the 40s on Spring 3100. So that's what I grew up on, and that was like the basis of a lot of you know, my background in policing. Started reading those. You know, I don't know if Mike, if you ever heard of, you know, you ever hear of the police camp?
Yes.
So
yes, I did.
So it was actually owned by the PBA, and it was upstate New York in Tannersville, and it was a police camp, and it was only police officers would go there. And you know, this was during the time when, you know, in the Catskills, the Borscht Belt, people would go away in the summer for a weekend in these hotels. Well, the police camp was only for cops, and we would go there once a week, and I had to put in, you know, in the beginning of the year, you'd have to put in for the week that you wanted to go, and you would end up going with the same group of people. And I grew up with these people at the police camp. You know, we would be swimming in a pool, on a lake, playing softball, running around, and you would be on your own because, you know, you were surrounded by other cops, you know, and you get into minor, you know, trouble, but nothing really big. And that's where I met people like Frank Bowles. I met Frank Bowles. I was probably about 10, 11 years old, and he was president of the Steuben Society, and he gave me a stamp, the Steuben stamp with their logo. And I went around the police camp putting this Steuben stamp all over the place. They probably had, you know, they spent hours, I'm sure, trying to clean some of it up, you know, but that was my background, you know. So when they say, you know, my father, Fred Cornicello, he was known, Queens Homicide, you know, guy detective like Eddie Zigo was my influence. Yeah, so my picture on the Daily News. Yes, my father did do police work.
Is that your dad doing a perp walk?
Yeah, he's in the front. Yeah, he's doing the perp walk. Out of it was a homicide in Queens. He gave me 2 pieces of advice, and the first one, I don't know that I really followed it, but I'm not sure how to take it. But the first thing he said to me when I was coming on the job was, "Don't get involved." Now, if anybody knows me,
you got involved.
I got involved. So I'm not sure how we really meant that, but I'll take it in a nice way. And then the other thing he told me was, listen, don't put your name on a contract for somebody unless you personally know it and will go down with it. Because once you stick up for somebody for something, if it screws up, you'll never be able to do that again. So I kind of remember that.
That's right. Can't help anyone else ever again. He's right.
Yeah. So, Yeah, so he worked with Dan Kelly and Queens Homicide. I learned a lot from Dan, and just a couple of personal encounters with him. And one of the things, Dan had these index cards, and if anybody worked with Dan in homicide, he had these index cards. And I found out that was really helpful to me, and I kind of took on that. So I always had with me like a stack of index card on any of the current homicides that we were working on. Each card was a current homicide, and I'd be able to look at it. We walk into the 7-9 and we went into the 8-1. What do we have going on here? Where are we at with this case? Kind of a reminder, and then just a simple reminders at a crime scene, some of the steps that you need to do. So I took a lot from Dan Kelly. And the other influence I have to mention is Eddie Zigo. So many people may not know who he is, but he was the detective who actually made the apprehension, the arrest on Son of Sam, on the Son of Sam case. Now, I was in high school during the Son of Sam episodes, and I went to school with Eddie Zigo's daughter, Susan, and we worked in McDonald's together, Susan and I. And I knew Eddie, and I knew Eddie growing up, and Eddie was the detective, and Eddie was always well dressed, and he was the cop that I wanted to be. I wanted to be a cop like my father, but I wanted to be a detective like Mr. Zigo. And I learned a very good story about that Son of Sam arrest and the summons, talking to Eddie later on. You want to go into it real quick?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So Son of Sam.
Yeah.
Son of Sam, right?
So I think the influences are really important, John.
Yeah. Okay.
And then we're going to go backward. We're going to then go backwards, walk you through
Perfect. Keep me on track.
Academy and then
Yep.
and stuff. But like this stuff is gold because I don't think people, and hopefully some of the listeners really appreciate the names you're dropping, and the influences are legendary people.
Yeah.
And again, there's so many more that we never even met that were legendary. The Bronx guys are going to have their crew.
Right.
And then,
Absolutely.
Like we grew up and were influenced by the golden age of true policemen and women and just dedicated, and like, this is your experience, tell it. And then we'll go backwards. We'll walk you through the academy. We'll walk you through transit and get you back to Brooklyn North Homicide.
Right. So I get an opportunity to take a test for police, and transit police was given a test just for transit. It wasn't a tri-agency. And this is when housing and transit and NYPD was separate. So test comes up. I said, you know what, I'm going to take this test. I'm going to take any test that I can. I took that test. I did very well on it. I was number like 310, and they were going to hire about 500 people. They hadn't hired in the transit police in a long time. Crime was up in the subway. This was all over the news. They had to do something. They're hiring transit cops. I get hired by transit October of 1981, and I go into the Transit Police Academy. Transit Police Academy. We were on 155th Street. It was an old elementary school that had been a homeless shelter that they emptied out, and they made it into the Transit Police Academy. 155th Street. The desks were for elementary school kids. We were in an elementary school.
So good. We
had no working showers in a locker room. So I was fortunate in that my phys ed class was at the end of the day. So we would go in, we would do gym, and we would be doing all the stuff we're doing in phys ed. You're running, you're doing boxing and everything else. And then you would just get dressed, and then we would leave and go home. And I'd get on a train and come back home. If you had gym at 9 o'clock in the morning, you had no showers. So it was not
so good.
A very nice place, but it broke us into the transit way. And graduated in March of 81, and there were over 400 brand new transit cops going into the transit police department. The transit police hadn't hired for a couple of years. They were not ready for us, who were all 400 ready to come in, crime fighting people coming into a department that not everybody in the department was into crime fighting. There was, just like cover your ass kind of stuff. But, we would come out and we were writing summonses, we were making arrests. District 33 is where I started. That's what District 33 looked like then. It's not a transit district now, but the building is still standing. It's a transit district. And that was my first command. And I come out.
So, John, I worked in the old District 33 too, in Brooklyn, Queens Task Force.
Yeah.
Man, what memories I have in that place.
Is that building it? That's
Yeah.
Transit District 33?
That's it.
My God.
God, on Van Sinderen, baby, Van Sinderen.
The detectives, and everywhere else, you go upstairs to the detective squad.
Yeah.
You go down in the basement to District 33 was where, and there used to be there was a cell down there, but they had to move it because there was nobody. You couldn't see the cell from the desk officer position. But yeah.
So, John, can I tell the audience a story? I'm going to pivot a little bit off your career, but I literally told this story a couple of weeks ago in working in this place because I was watching The Wire, and in The Wire, the HBO series on the Baltimore cops, they talked about narcotraficantes. And so for anyone, any transit listeners, any police department people who know Ivan Vijalba from the New York City Transit Police Department in the late 80s, early 90s. So when you go down the stairs, remember there was a payphone on the landing on the way to the, and so nobody had cell phones right back then, right? So this is a side story, and I don't want to sidetrack your career because it's a stellar career, but I want to do those little stories. And so in that building right there, which is on the screen right now, Ivan Vijalba, or Hilalba, who was from Puerto Rico, and had a very heavy accent, and English was probably his second language, but he was a wonderful cop. Him and Tony Landy were great plainclothes cops through Brooklyn, Queens. He answered the phone one day on that second landing that you're talking about going downstairs. And someone called up and said, "Donde está Traficante?" And they were talking about a cop whose last name was Traficante. And then Ivan got really mad, and he's like, you're talking in English, in his worst broken English. He's like, you're calling a police precinct asking for a drug trafficker. And she's like, no, I am looking for a guy named Traficante. And he's like, no, there's no drug traffickers here. This is a police station. And he slammed the phone, and he came down into the locker room at that lower level. And he's like, hey, do you believe these mother effers? They're trying to call here and deal drugs. And it's like, no, Ivan, we have somebody that works here in uniform task force. Yeah, his last name is Traficante. He's like, oh, well, I guess I fucked his night up.
Never mind. Yeah.
Anyway, that's that building. That's the building right there.
Yeah, it is. That was my first command. I made 2 arrests in the first month and a half coming out of the academy. So my very first arrest, and Jerry Castro, that's Jerry Castro with his arm around me. I see Jerry every once in a while still over the summer. I walk in for a 4 to 12, and somebody comes into the desk, and they said, "Hey, there's a guy outside. I think he's looking to steal cars. He's looking at the parked cars." So I'm just walked in plain clothes. I'm getting ready to do a 4 to 12, get into uniform. Jerry hands me a radio, transit radio, and says, "John, go out there, see if you can find the guy. Keep in touch with me, and I'll get you some backup." So I go out. All right, I'm doing my thing, and I see a guy, and he's taking hubcaps off of a brand new Lincoln, and he's putting them in a bag, and then he's taking another set of hubcaps off of another car. And I come out on him, and, my first arrest, police don't move, get up against the wall. And then all of a sudden the cavalry all shows up, and the radio happened to work because I was only about, 100 feet away from the district. And anybody knows transit radios, they don't really work well. And that was my first arrest for petty larceny. And he was stealing hubcaps from a transit worker's car, from two transit workers' cars, because there was a whole transit bus garage was there. That's where all the transit workers. And that was my first introduction to what the transit police known as off-system arrests. Because if you made an arrest and you weren't on the transit system, you had to write a report. And in transit, the PD always had nice numbers for their reports, UF 49. Transit was very simple. It was called a to from, and you wrote it to and from, and you always started off with I am and your name and your shield and your tax number. And I had to write a report on how it was that I made this arrest off of the transit system. And I'm going to give you another quick one. A couple of weeks.
Hold on, John. So I just want all the listeners to know that if you're only listening and not watching, John pulled up and I have on the screen, not only the original, very first report that he wrote over 40 years ago is up on the screen, but also the lieutenant who signed off on it. And you ran into him how long ago, John, on the beach?
I run into Jerry like maybe every year, once a year at summer at a beach club, and he will always, the first thing he says is, I got you your first arrest, remember? And like, yes, I remember, Jerry. I absolutely do. And I don't know why, because I'm crazy. I have the copy of the first arrest report. I have my actual first arrest report because I'm a nut and I save things like that. But
no, that's pretty awesome. And I will say, in 23 episodes in, John sent me more photos, more documentation as any other. And I can't get to them all, but I guess that speaks to, we're just going to have to keep bringing you back. So, all right. So you get out of the academy, you make your first collar. Where are you working? What are you doing? And then how do you work your way into plain clothes and then the decoy squad?
Okay. So I'm in District 33 and I'm doing train patrol during the day was the 5th platoon. It was, 10 to 6 or whatever we worked, 11 to 7 or something. And I'm with an officer who's like a training officer for me, Dinko, and I forget his first name. But anyway, we're in the training, we're in uniform, we're pulling into DeKalb Avenue on the L. We look out the window, and on the other platform, we're going in southbound on the northbound platform. We see a guy grab a woman's bag and start running out of the station. Dingo goes, you see that bag snatch? So we get out of the train and we start running. Now I'm out of the academy. I'm fresh and I'm in good shape, and we run up the stairs and we're by Wyckoff Avenue and we start chasing this guy and we see him. He's got the bag in his hand and we're running. And he drops the bag. I stop. I pick up the bag. Dinko's still chasing the guy. I'm running behind him and I'm losing ground. And I'm like, all right, this foot race thing isn't going to work. And coming down the block is a cab, a livery cab. And I flag him down. I commandeer the cab. Tommy, you'll know this. This was the old transit trick. Commandeer the cab, follow them, chase them. So he starts driving up a couple of blocks. The guy makes a turn. We're able to get in front of him. I jump out of the cab. I'm in front. Dinko's behind. We grab the guy. We have him up against the wall. It's by the school on Seneca Avenue. We cuff him. We got the bag. We have the complainant back at the station. I'm winded and I feel bad. Like I couldn't keep up with this guy. Well, what I didn't know, and I learned a little bit after that when we get back to the station house, and the lieutenant says, I says to the lieutenant, yeah, I couldn't keep up with Dinko. And he says to me, he runs marathons, right? I'm like, what?
Of course.
But yeah, he runs the New York Marathon. He goes up to Boston. He runs marathons. I'm like, so now I didn't feel so bad. Like, oh, all right, well, I needed the car to keep up with him.
The big question is, who paid the cab?
Yeah, thanks, buddy.
We used to commandeer cabs and stuff. All transit cops used to commandeer vehicles all the time. But John, so I'm watching the time.
Yeah.
Good stories in the precinct. Before you get to decoy, you're working with Fran Lozado.
Yeah. So I'm in anti-crime. Now, we were the first class that our probation was a year and a half. It was extended to 18 months. It wasn't 12 months.
Are you okay, John? All right, everybody, just so you
So,
know, John worked with Fran Lozada, the first female killed in New York City Police Department in the line of duty. So we're gonna.
Fran and I were we were in like the same team, and we were in the traffic team, and that was like the high. We would do the midday school conditions, and in the summer you would work anti-crime, and I was teamed up with Fran, and we were working anti-crime, and the one day Kenny Donahue was the administrative sergeant, and he puts the two of us in plain clothes, and he says to Fran and I, listen, you guys are still on probation. I had to talk to Captain Costello to okay it, to he didn't want to do this because he's still on probation, so be really careful. So we were very careful. We each wrote a book of summonses, and we made a gun collar on a fair beat at Utica Avenue on the A. And when we come back in the next day, Donahue looks at us and he goes, and if anybody knows Donahue, he didn't give away a lot of.
Was he a sergeant at the time, Kenny?
He was a sergeant at the time, and he said, "Nice work." He was the administrative sergeant, kind of a transit legend. So I was in anti-crime, and I worked with Bobby Mullane. We made a great robbery collar on a pattern up on Central Avenue on the M. Me and Bobby, again, we start chasing a perp. We were there because the guy had hit a couple of times on the station. He chain snatched. He goes running. We're chasing him. And this kid was 15 years old, and he was outrunning us. And I'm on the radio, and the radio doesn't work. If you know that, you'd be on the radio. I'm calling Central, on the M, and then he calling me back. What's your location, Central on the M? We're in pursuit. What's your location? So it wasn't working. I took the radio, and I threw it at the perp. It knocked him off balance. He fell. We collared the perp. I pick up the radio. We got a nice robbery collar. Lieutenant Harrington is very happy that his anti-crime team took a robbery collar on this pattern. I turned.
Hold on a second, John.
Yeah.
Mike, Lieutenant Harrington. That's Mike Harrington's dad, right?
Yes, Neil Harrington.
Oh.
Neil Harrington.
Yeah.
Just
do a whole show on Neil. Great guy.
For the rest. So, like everyone who's listening, I hope you hear all the history and all the legacy and all the legends that are going. John, keep going. So Neil Harrington.
Neil Harrington, and he didn't really like anti-crime because we would bring in collars, and that was the transit. They didn't really want people in the cells. They just kind of wanted you to be there, come in at the end of the night and sign out. But he was happy that we made this robbery collar because it had been a pattern. So it was one of the things that I remember. With Bobby Mullane, we still talk about it. It was a great time. I took the radio. I went into the radio room, and I said, this radio's not working too well. I think you might want to send it out for repair. Didn't really have to mention that I kind of threw it, but it worked. It did what it needed to do. So Fran was set to go to anti-crime. She, myself, Jimmy Capaldo was also in District 33. We're going to anti-crime. I'm sorry, no, the task force, from anti-crime to the citywide task force. Mm-hmm. And the task force was the career path that you would go in transit to then move up, to become a detective. And it was high activity, write a lot of summonses, make a lot of arrests. And Fran was going to come to the task force, and we had talked about we would team up. And Jimmy Capaldo, being that we worked in 33, we would work in the same team with Sergeant Frank Cangro. And then Fran turned it down. Her boyfriend at the time worked in District 1. He was an older transit cop who felt that task force was stupid. You don't want to do that. You're only writing summonses. It's a waste of time. Stay in the district. So she did. So I went to task force, and I teamed up with Jimmy Capaldo. Yeah. And we were working.
I worked with Jimmy
in the UI task force, and we were a good team. We made a lot of collars. It was all about making collars, writing summonses, making arrests. And then while we were there, the crime had been going up, and there were in Williamsburg area, there was a high influx of crimes against the Hasidim, and Transit was going to put together a decoy squad. So, they said, put in, if you're interested in putting in for it. So we did. Jimmy and I both put in to go to decoys, and we got interviewed by Richie Gollinge, Lieutenant Gollinge. Inspector Dunlap, great guy, was the CO of the task force. So I always figured, well, we'll do this. This sounds like it's interesting. It's something different. I mean, I can't see myself as, being like the decoy and getting robbed, but I could certainly be a backup. I could do that. And we go into into decoys, and there's two teams. There's Jack Maple is the sergeant, and he's got one team, and Frank Cangro has the other team. And we knew Frank he was a sergeant in District 33. He was our task force sergeant. So we went on his decoy team. So they were two different teams. And essentially what we were doing was going out onto the subway and providing an opportunity for a crime to occur should a perpetrator be looking to victimize someone, and put us in place of a civilian victim and make the arrest. And we would make
John,
the arrest.
I'm sorry to interrupt. Do you come back from decoys and go back to Fran, or do you not want to talk about it? Because if you don't want to talk about Fran and her situation.
So Fran stays in District 33.
I'm sorry, I don't want to put you, if you don't want to talk about it, we don't have to talk about it.
I'm good. I'm on a roll.
Because I want to talk about Fran, and then we'll talk about your decoy. Because you were close to her.
So
and
she stays in anti-crime, and she's working with another officer who had been there a long time. Good cop, he always made a lot of arrests. And what happens that night is they're scheduled for a meal. So they're at Myrtle and Wyckoff, which is generally, I worked with him before, and that's where you would kind of split up for meal, because he had a place that he would go, nearby, and she was going to go back to the district and eat there, and then they were going to meet up again. She's on a train by herself, coming on the L train, pulling to Wilson Avenue, and there's a chain snatch. She sees the chain snatch. She goes after the perp. She's chasing the perp. She's by herself. She's got a radio. The radio's not transmitting. They don't know where she is. She runs past. Herbie Fonseca was a patrol cop at Wilson Avenue at the time. She catches the perp in a cemetery lot behind the train station. She's putting cuffs on him. The perp overpowers her, gets her gun, shoots and kills her. I had seen her, the case folder. It was terrible. And she pleaded for her life. He shot and killed her. Jeter was his last name, not the baseball player.
Jeter.
So Jimmy Capaldo and I are up on District 11. We're in the task force, and we're writing summonses, and I hear on the radio, Shield 4721 come into Central, Shield 4721. And I said, oh, that's Fran's Shield. They're trying to raise her on the radio. And Transit Radio was it had one channel, and they would just activate different antennas. So we were in the Bronx, and they were trying to get her on the air anywhere, and they never got her. Lieutenant Donnery was the desk officer, and they find her in the lot, and she's DOA. Jimmy and I get a ride back from one of the PBA delegates who was given a presentation up in District 11. We go to the scene. Kenny Donahue won't let me walk up to the scene, and they send us out doing some canvases. And, this was one of those cases that it comes back to good detective work. Good detective work meant canvassing the area. And one of the detectives from Major Case, Vinny Carrera, knocking on doors, gets a woman who says that she saw a guy, she heard a shot, and she knows what a shot is. She lived in the area where that happened every day. And she saw a guy climbing up the fire escape, and she was able to identify him. And within 2 days, he's apprehended and arrested for her murder. And it was, again, and it comes back to doing good detective work. That so often, that's what it is. We could talk about technology and DNA, but it's the foot on the ground. It's the detective that puts it together, because technology in and of itself is not putting anybody to jail. It was good detective work. So it was very sad. The officer that she was working with, I don't think was ever the same after that. I know he was not well regarded by other people in the district after that.
Because they split up, John?
Yeah. And then the thing that still sticks in my head is standing 2 days. It was a Sunday afternoon, and they had made the arrest. And we were in District 33, Jimmy and I, and we had worked that weekend, and he comes in, and I'm not going to name him. Anybody that knows the case knows who he is. Mm-hmm. And he comes in, and we're all pretty upset. And he walks up to the desk.
You okay, John?
And he says, Can I have an overtime slip, Lou? I'm like, after all this, he just wants to make sure he gets his overtime slip in.
Wow.
It was sad. It was very sad.
Yeah.
The funeral.
That guy's got it.
This was the first female officer killed in the line of duty in New York City.
I remember that.
It was a good cop. We did a lot of police activity together. We wrote summonses together. She did. I make an arrest one time. This is kind of funny. So I'm collaring this female is menacing people on the train, on the J train. She's got a knife and she's menacing people. I step on and I see this thing is going on, and I go to apprehend her. We pull into Chauncey on the J train. And again, radio, Chauncey on the J, 1013. Nobody hears anything. The conductor sees me wrestling with this female, and he blows the whistle, the long short, which was a call for police, the long short. And then the clerk called the police, and then all of a sudden, the cavalry showed up, and we got this collar. So now I bring this female in. We got a menacing collar. I got the knife. We rolled on the ground. I'm all dirty, and we got to get a female to search the female. So Fran is working. Fran, come in. You need you to search the female. So she searches the female. No weapons. We cuff her. Do all the paperwork. Eventually, we end up down in central booking, and you go to Brooklyn Central Booking, and they have to they have to search their own prisoners. So we go into central booking. Here's my prisoner. They got to get a female officer to come in and search her. And a little bit later, and then the cop comes over to me and he says, "Who searched your prisoner?" I said, "You searched in District 33 by a female officer." "Well, she is a he." I said, "What?" "Yeah, she is a he." Like, oh, okay. I guess she didn't catch that in the search. But anyway.
You guys didn't do strip searches back then.
No, central booking was funny. You'd have to wait. Sometimes you had to wait for the central booking cop to come and search your prisoner.
Yeah.
And I remember standing there at 2:00 in the morning, and they bring the cop who's going to search. Now, the people that were in central booking weren't there because they said, "I want to work in central booking." They were there because they had to take their guns from them, and they didn't know where to put them. So they put them in central booking. So they couldn't, really get in, hurt themselves or other people. And I'm looking at a guy who's going to search my prisoner who could barely stand up straight at 2:00 in the morning. And I'm like, I had to wait for him to search my prisoner. But, we were transit, and we took a lot of that from transit. You'd go down to central booking as a transit cop. And I remember as a guy sitting, the room is full and you're waiting to get processed by the DA, and it was dirty, and, sitting in these dirty chairs. And a cop, says to me, were you transit? I said, "Yeah, I'm from transit." "Yeah, what do you got, a fare beat?" Like my collar was was only a fare beat. So I said to him, "Well, actually, I got a fare beat with a gun." He went, oh. So now I know where
with a gun
people sign in. So I go up and I'm looking. I go back in. I says, "You're talking to me like that? You got a 511 collar." Well, that was like a expired license. He's talking to me like, "Oh, Transit, you got a fare beat? Like, yeah, I got a fare beat with a gun. You're here with a 511 collar, like, and So anyway, but Brooklyn Central Booking was an episode in itself of what you would do with Central Booking.
Oh, we could do stories on that all day, but
Oh.
something came up in the chat where they asked if Jeter was convicted, and then he was, and Modern Samurai, thanks, 36 years, released in 2021. And then I am going to add to the stage December 19th, shooter who killed first female NYPD officer. She wasn't NYPD, she was New York City Transit Police before the merger, was paroled. Thank you, Andrew Cuomo.
Yeah.
I believe his in excess of 47 cop killers have been paroled under Andrew Cuomo. I'm going to defer to John McCarry and Eric Dim, Marlon Bethel, Sal Greco, de Blasio, Eric Adams, Mondami, Cuomo. They're all the same. They all hate cops. They don't care about cops. They will parole cop killers. So we'll leave it at that. And John, I know this was very emotional for you, for Fran.
We're expendable, Tom.
So now we're in the decoy unit, and
okay, here we go.
Good. So we would do we had two sets of operations. We had a pocketbook for pickpockets, and we would have a female officer who would have a pocketbook, and then we would do the bag snatch. So we're going through the first our orientation and training. Now, we were the first unit that was coming back to do decoys in maybe 10 years. So there were transit cops that had done decoys before, so they were talking to us about how to do a decoy operation. And so you see the bag of marbles. So we had there was one of the supervisors thought that maybe it would be a good idea if we carried these marbles around with us, so that if the perp was running away, we could throw the marbles and then they would trip on it. Now, if I made that story up, it would be unbelievable. But I actually have the marbles that person said might be a good idea for us to do. In our minds, we're thinking, well, if I'm throwing those marbles and he's falling, what are we doing when we're running behind them? But anyway, I have those, and anybody who was in that first decoy class, and I do see them for dinner pretty often, we always have a good laugh over the marbles. But we get trained, and we're going to do decoys. And in a very short period of time, I end up orienting into the role of the decoy. Now, some of the things that you have to, you had to realize, and when we would training and we would talk to people, now that's a decoy group when Steve Savis is in the far right next to John Dunlap.
In the blue shirt.
Yeah, great.
And that's Dunlap, right?
And that's Dunlap, yeah. And that's Rossiter is all the way on the left with Jerry Lyons next to him.
Yep, so, Terry Crews.
Yeah, you got a whole list.
Cherry's in there.
So I'm there. If you see Steve and you go over like two in the red shirt and the mustache, that's me with more hair and less weight. Next to Terry.
Is that Yibong So?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. It's Nuciforo.
Nuciforo.
Bill McGowan.
Me, Jimmy Capaldo.
Yeah.
Where's Jimmy Capaldo, John?
The tall guy in the back with the swoop hair.
Yes. Richie Bryant, and then that's Billy McGowan between Richie Bryant and Jimmy Capaldo. Ronnie Jackson. So it was me, Stacy Weiss, Jimmy, and Ronnie Jackson, and were the team. Was the one decoy team, and Stacy would do the pocketbook decoy, and then we would do the chain snatch. So one of the things right away, you gotta get yourself oriented into the fact that just because, let's say, I'm the decoy and I have a chain, well, anybody on the team could end up becoming a victim. So you always had to be alert. You couldn't just point to the perp and go, no, not me. You want to go after him. You at any time, and that happened a few times where they didn't go after the decoy; they went after someone else. So it's only funny because we could still tell it. We were working with an Italian journalist, and we had gotten a lot of notoriety on the running the decoys, and they would send people out that would want to work with us, and we would our team would get one, and then Maple's team would work with one. Maple's team had the one that ended up on New York Magazine with the whole wolf packs. We had an Italian journalist that came out with us, and we were leaving. We turned out in Metropolitan Avenue on the G, Lorimer on the L, Metro on the G, and we're going to take him out in the afternoon, and we're going to ride on the train. I have a chain. Stacy, we designate Stacy to stay with the journalist. He's from Italy, speaks broken English. He's dressed really nice. He had this nice bag, and I remember saying, I got to find out where he got that bag because I'd like to get that. We were always looking for different props. So he's dressed pretty good. I got to try to get a bag like his. I'll talk to him later on. So we get on the number 2 train, and Stacy takes the journalist into the next car, and she's gonna, with him, look into us. We're in the back car, and I have the chain on, and I got 3 backups with me, and sure enough, we pull in to a station on the 2. We're in Brooklyn. Group gets in, coming out of school, and they start, and they're going, and we start looking, and we think they're looking at me. They look at me, and I hear them talking. I had the chain that had a Mercedes. It was a Mercedes emblem. And they always liked that Mercedes, and they're talking, and then we think they're going to start to go, and they don't. They go into the next car, and they walk out, and we're like, I thought we were going to have something here. Within a minute, the door opens up, and Stacy is there, and she's going, "Get in here! They're robbing him!" And the journalist is on the ground, and they're taking his bag.
You knew this is coming.
So we make the collar. We got like 5 people arrested. Oath to 32. He's got footprints on his jacket, on the bag. He's not hurt. He's got a great story to tell. And he writes a magazine article, and it's in Italian. It's L'Espresso was the name of the magazine, and he ends up when he gets published, he reaches out to us, and he brings us up to his apartment. He was in Uptown Manhattan, and he put together a little spread for us with pizza and soda, and you guys, when he shows us the magazine, gives us copies of the magazine, which I can't read Italian, but my grandmother couldn't. When I showed my grandmother the magazine article, and she's reading it, and my picture's in there. All I know is she's reading the article, and she's going like this. Oh my God, Madonna. So we said to him, what are you doing? And he says, well, I'm leaving New York. My editor asked me if I wanted to go to Beirut. He said, Beirut. And he says, well, after working with you, couple of days later, I was buying a TV for my apartment, and I was in Queens on Queens Boulevard, and we had the TV in the back of the taxi. And when we stopped at a light, we got surrounded by these people, and they were shaking the car, and they stole the TV, and they were trying to get me out of the car. He says, after that, I figured, what could be worse going to Beirut? So he was in New York going to Beirut.
Right? Safe from Beirut, yeah.
Yeah.
Of course.
We had, the decoys was fun. It was crazy stuff. I I still to this day have a fear of knives. And when I was doing the decoy, and I'd have the chain on, and you would feign like you were drunk, out of it. And I had bought a tuxedo in a thrift shop for $10. It cost me $10 for this tuxedo. I had a yellow fluffy shirt and a bow tie, and I would sometimes put a New Year's Eve party hat on in the middle of June or July and get on the train and look like I passed out. And there were 2 times where I had a knife held to me. And when we were doing the decoy, listen, the object was nobody gets hurt. So if the backup saw that there was a weapon got introduced, right away they would interrupt the operation. I had a guy was coming to get the chain, and he had a knife out, and one of my backups saw that, and I was giving them the signal. I had a signal that I would give, and they came out and they say to the guy, "Oh man, the cops here, cops." So the guy said, "Wow, where?" And then he puts the knife away, and he goes to leave, and they grab him. And another time I had a knife pulled, but this guy was nuts. He was crazy. And I saw him take the knife out, and fortunately so did my other backups. And before he even approached me, they grabbed him and they had him. So I was more afraid of a knife than a gun, because my feeling was they're not going to shoot you, but
Right.
they could easily. And to this day, I don't like knives. But I had that. So put that picture up. So I'm dressed like that in that tuxedo and the party hat, and we're at 42nd and Times Square, and we would worked all night, and we didn't get anything. Nothing happened. Nobody went for the decoy. We did a bunch of operations, and you were always on. When you were running the decoy, from the minute you walked out the door of the station, the police station, you were in your role. Because you never knew who was watching you. So you were always in your role. So we were at 4, 2, and 7. Nothing's going on. Let's go. We're going to go back. It's like 3 o'clock in the morning. We get off at 4 in the morning. We were doing 8 to 4s, 8 at night to 4 in the morning. We're walking down 42nd Street towards 6th Avenue. And I'm alone because we're still in roll, and my backups are around me, and I see them, and they all see me. And as I'm walking towards 6th Avenue from 7th, I see 3 guys on the street, and they pick up on me, and I see they pick up on me, because all of a sudden they start to split up, and they're walking over towards the subway entrance, and like in 3 different spots. So I see that, and I know, because I know I have good faith in my backups, they see the same thing. They know what's going on. So now as I get up to the stairs, I'm going to walk down into the subway, and I figure I'm going to get grabbed right there. But they let me walk past them. And I guess the feeling was they're going to rob me in the middle of the street. They'll wait till I get into the subway. So that set of stairs, you're going down a flight of stairs, then you were on a landing, and then there was another flight of stairs. I'm sorry, I don't want to get thrown downstairs. So when I come down and I get to the first landing, I hesitate. I figure, let me give them time to catch up. And they catch up. And now I get surrounded. 1, 2, 3. And they start going through everything. Take the chain. I had a wallet. They take the wallet. We never carried money anywhere, because we never wanted anybody to be able to say, "Oh, they had money sticking out. It was too enticing."
Entrapment.
So we never carried money. So we had a wallet that had phony credit cards in it. So they had something. They would take the wallet, and they're searching me. Now, you're the decoy, but you had to carry your weapon, and you had to have your shield on you, because at any time the roles could reverse, and you are now the backup. You are now taking action. So I had my gun in a belly band in my crotch, and my shield was attached to my belly band, because they would search you, and they would look on your ankles for a gun, because they watch TV, and they knew cops carried ankle holsters, but they didn't really like to go into your groin.
So what'd you have to do to identify yourself?
I'm kind of keeping myself in a position so that they don't feel my gun. They get everything. They take off. I yell the code word, which is bingo. I'm going bingo, bingo. All the backups come in. they all get apprehended. We got 3 collars. 2 of them are on parole. They go to trial. So they have nothing to lose. So they're going to go to trial. So now I'm on the stand, and the trial consists of trying to, each defense attorney is minimizing his own client's role. Like, well, maybe the other guy took the chain, but my guy didn't do anything. So they're having me describe what each person did. Now, of course, after we make the arrest, the first thing I do when we get back to the district is I make notes. Who was wearing what, where they were standing, what they did. This one went into my inside pocket. This guy went to my back pocket. This guy over here took the chain. This is what they were wearing. So now at trial, I can describe all this and what each one of them did. Defense attorney is up and he says to me, where did you go? Did you have meal that night? Yes, we did, because it was in my memo book. And we went to the New York Times building, to the cafeteria. Yeah. We had meal.
Like everybody.
Why? Because you were always in a role. So, where are you going to go? We went in there. You were allowed to go in there as cops. They didn't give us food for free. You paid for it. And then you were sitting in that cafeteria, and then we would go out and we would do our decoy run. What did you eat? I don't remember what I ate. Did you have something to drink there? Yeah, but I don't remember what I had. And he says, the defense attorney, and he slipped up because he says to me, you mean to tell me you remember what 3 different people did while they surrounded you, and you don't remember what you had for dinner that night? So I said, before there was any objection, I said, well, the way I got robbed was more memorable to me than what I had for dinner. Everybody objected. The jury will disregard that comment. He opened it up, and that's what I said. They all got convicted. Yeah. When we get done with the trial, we're in Brooklyn Supreme Court, and we were big spenders. We went across the street to McDonald's, and we were having lunch. And the defense attorney that had me on the stand is online at McDonald's, and he looks at me. And he says to me, nice work, officer.
Yeah, of course.
Thank you.
Well,
he's an attorney.
John, it was good work. And having been the second phase of the decoy squad, and like I acknowledged at the beginning, you training us, the new ones coming in, and I know Mike Fanning, a future guest on the 10-4 Tavern, and I know you guys talked, and I talked to him the other day. What a great time. And someone in the chat asked Jimmy Capaldo, how could he have been a decoy at 6'4"? And I was not a good decoy either, because I was just too big and I looked too aggressive. And, I'm a wide body. I'm not a tall body, but I'm a wide body. And, like they didn't want to mess with you, but all the little guys, like, man, they just got robbed every day, like 4 times a day. And so we can get into. So John, just one thing. So it's 8:42. We had a little delay on the tech. We really got to do the Brooklyn North. We're going into overtime tonight, so everyone can put in overtime slips. We're going to go into it. I want to do. I'm going to let you finish your thought, but we're going to do an extradition because I think it's funny and the pictures are hilarious.
Yeah.
And then I want to get into Brooklyn North, and let's do a little bit of time in Brooklyn North, and then we can bring George back because I see him wallowing in the background. He's cocktailing, has his doers and soda, and so he wants to get back into the chat. So final thoughts on the decoy squad. Let's do the extradition. Let's go to Brooklyn North when you go from the warrant squad to the 7-7 because that's where we met.
Right. So after the merge, so I went from decoys. I was a detective in the robbery squad, and that's me in the middle. Yes, that is me. Again, more hair, less weight. Jerry Lyons, and a prisoner that we had extradited from Chicago. So this prisoner was a decoy arrest in New York City, and he had fled to Chicago. He was arrested and did jail time in Chicago. He did 1.5 years in jail, and now they were going to extradite him back to the city because they had a good decoy case. One of the things when we would do a decoy, they never knew that they robbed a police officer decoy until they went to arraignment, because one of the whole strategy was We got them. They snatched a chain. The backups move in. They don't know that I was a cop. They just think they robbed some guy who will probably never show up in court in their mind. And the detectives, the officers, would get a statement from him. And you would get all sorts of statements like, oh, I know him. We were out drinking all day. He told me to hold his watch. He was afraid somebody was going to take his chain. I was only holding it.
Oh,
and
my
we would
God.
have, you know what? Listen, why don't you write that down so we tell
write it down,
no words? And they would write that whole thing down. They would go to arraignment, and the defense attorney, legal aid would be there, and they would go, you wrote a statement. Yeah. I was, and he would say, that was a cop. What? Yeah, that was a cop that you robbed. That was a decoy.
Yeah, so good.
So 90% of the cases pled. The people that didn't plead were usually on parole because they really had nothing to lose. So but it was kind of funny. What it did was it got us ready for being a detective, because like I always said, if you were not there and saw what happened, you could believe what they were telling you.
Oh, yeah.
You would get a statement. If
I
I didn't know that was a decoy and I was part of it, I would believe this guy. They were believable. And it reminded
John,
us later on.
Yeah, well, tell the audience how many indictments did we get, and tell them about the only no true bill ever existed in all of why was it? It was all on emotion. It wasn't really evidence.
Yeah. So if they went for indictment, they got indicted. If they went to trial, we would convict at trial. The only one that we didn't get was a guy who was on parole, who got on the stand at the grand jury, testified on his own behalf.
Oh, boy.
And cried. And the jurors said they kind of felt sorry for him when he cried. And a judge said to us afterwards, he called us in and he said, listen, if you cry in court, it's kind of hard to overcome that. You guys did nothing wrong. Keep doing what you're doing. You can't fight that, because when we didn't get that conviction and that indictment right away, like, what did we do something wrong? The department was concerned. Maybe what do we have to change? What was it? And the judge said, listen, when you cry on the stand, it's all up in the air. Don't worry about it.
Yeah. All right. So listen, guys, we're really going late, but as long as you guys have the stamina, I'm going to go. I knew this was going to be a long night. I didn't expect attack. However, with that, we're going to shift. John, you were in the warrant squad at the merger. You were in the warrant squad in the NYPD. You came over to the 7-7 squad. That's where we reconnected. That's probably where you met Mike in the 7-7 precinct.
Yep.
I am now going to sit back and listen. Mike Marino is going to come in. You're then going to go to Brooklyn North Homicide. George is going to come back in at the end. So let's try to do this over the next, 30, 45 minutes or so.
Sure.
I know it's a lot. There's a lot of murder work. There's a lot of really good detective work in here. You can always bring you back. Pete would love to have those conversations, but Mike, this is your place now. John, 7-7 precinct. You come over from the warrant squad.
I went from warrant squad to Brooklyn North warrants when SATCOM was created.
This is 97, right?
Right. So I go to the 7 squad. Yeah. So I'm in warrants first around 97, and they're creating SATCOM, Strategic and Tactical Command, Brooklyn North, something totally different concept. Everything comes under the borough commander, and so now I was asked by Joe Dunn, do you want to come to Brooklyn North to this new concept and run the warrant squad, or do you want to stay in King's Warrants, which would be, Brooklyn South? And he said, no pressure. It's entirely up to you. I'm going to give you the chance. I'd like to have you, but it's entirely up to you. I could see the writing on the wall, and I said, you know what, this sounds like this is a good opportunity. This is something new. I want to be part of this. Plus, I like Brooklyn North. I like the activity. Don't get involved. I had to get involved. Anyway, so I go to Brooklyn North. I'm running Brooklyn North warrants. We're out of the 7-7 precinct. We took over an office across from where the 7-7 squad was. And, things taken place, and the lieutenant that was in charge of the 7-7 squad had some difficulty, had some difficult comm stats. And I get called down by, and I had been at Comstat for warrants, and I get called down by Joe Esposito. Again, great influencer, great cop. Lost him way too soon, way too young. And Joe says to me, John, I'd like you to take over the 7-7 squad. So I said, well, Chief, you have somebody there. And I kind of knew the guy, and I didn't, I was kind of in a bad position. He says, no, I want you to take over the 7-7 squad. I think it'll be good for you. You're the right person. I want you to be there. I said, all right. So I take over the 7-7 squad. The lieutenant that's there, they make him the borough ICO, Integrity Control Officer. They were trying to find a spot for him. So the one quick introduction to the 7-7 squad. Now, Tommy Joyce is there. Tommy Coomey was the other sergeant. Mark Poirier, right?
Mark Poirier. Rest in peace, Mark Poirier.
God rest his soul.
Best friend. Good friend. Lost him.
Loud.
Yeah.
He never had it. Just so everyone knows, Mark Poirier never had a conversation at normal tone. He was always yelling and screaming. Hence the nickname Loud.
Loved him.
So I take over the 7-7 squad. My first week there. First day. 4 or 5-year-old out the window of the Albany houses, DOA. Climbed up on a bed, went out the window.
No
DOA.
window guards.
Second day, we had a non-fatal shooting on Franklin Avenue, and we had a homicide on Nostrand Avenue. First week, 7-7 squad. I'm still looking through papers, right? Okay, who's who? I'm trying to remember names. I think who's that? Oh, that's Brian. Okay. Following week, I get a call from that lieutenant that I replaced, who is now the ICO. He says, John, I got to come in and inspect your I-card folders. I said, what?
Yes.
Now, we had folders, if you had an I-card investigation card, you had a file on each one, and they had to have, paperwork in it and what was done for it and why there was an I-card. You had to have a separate folder so that if somebody got arrested, the detective could pull the folder and then they knew what to do with the case. John, I have to come and investigate your I-card folders. I said, Lieutenant, using his name, they're exactly the same way they looked when you left here a week ago. Help yourself.
Yeah. You're investigating yourself.
I'm like, are you kidding me?
That
wasn't so bad. He went into another squad where Tommy, you know who I'm talking about.
Yep.
Said to him, if you don't walk out, if you don't leave my squad now, I'm going to hang you out the window by your feet. Anyway, 7-7 squad was, we had a lot of interesting cases there. Good crew of people. John Barber. I love John. Another guy who lost way too soon. Bobby Rivera was one of the best detectives that I worked with. They worked on that Amy Watkins case diligently.
Yep.
We had a couple of interesting homicides. We had the Amy Watkins homicide. We had the Good Samaritan homicide. Rupinder Singh, who a Good Samaritan on the Belt Parkway picks up 3 people whose car broke down to drive them home to Brooklyn. They rob him, shoot and kill him, and dump his body in Lincoln Terrace Park. We were able to get a good informant with gangs. 2 days later, somebody was trying to sell the car, and we were able to make 3 arrests on that within the weekend.
John, did you do the one where the guys was hitting the bodegas?
Yeah.
Yeah.
We had the serial killer. Yeah. So we had the serial killer, the 40 caliber serial killer case, Lame Price. So I was in homicide at that point, but he hit the 772, the laundromat in the 77, and a bodega in the 77. He had a bodega in the 106 and a bodega in the 63. And it was all over the place, and we couldn't find a pattern. And again, good detective work. Two of the best detectives that I had, it's hard to, I hate to use that term because I had so many of the detectives I had in the homicide squad would come to that category of best. But Tony Vigiani and Jeannie Valentin are canvassing the area to try to find a witness or cameras. And Tony sees a camera on a new building residence
keep talking.
on Atlantic Avenue. And he can't get the owner, and he goes back again, and the owner's not there. And like the third time, he finds the owner. He gets to view the video, and we now have a shot of a guy climbing into that building and walking around. But we have a good shot, and it matches the other video that we had from a gas station down the block of who we know the killer is from the laundromat. And again, detective work. We make up flyers. We have this picture on flyers, and we saturate the area. We're knocking on doors. And we figure that if anybody knows who knows him will see his picture and they'll know who he is. Hard to pick him out by the video, but somebody will know him and somebody will give him up. Turns out he comes into the 7-7 precinct and one night and says, that poster that you have, I know who, I've seen that guy. He lives around in the neighborhood. I think I know who he is. Well, it's him. So now Tony and Jeannie go there and they talk to him, and something's just not right. You get that feeling. And I always said this when we were teaching detectives, there's women's intuition and there's detective intuition. And when something just doesn't feel right, you as a detective have to follow it through until you get to the bottom of it. Either you clear it up or there's just some reason why you're going after it. They don't like this guy. He has no record. They can't find anything. Why would he come in to tell us that he thinks he's seen the guy in the neighborhood, right?
Right.
The next day, they reach out to him. Hey, listen, Lame, we want to talk to you a little bit more. Maybe you can help us. And he says to Tony, well, I'm the one. So now Tony's got to talk to him. He's on the phone with him, got to convince him, let's meet us. We're going to try to help you. No, I'm going to get hurt. No, you're not going to get hurt. Tony uses his best detective skills. He was a hostage negotiator. They get him into the 7-5. They put him in the room, and we get statements from him on all those homicides and convict him. Lame Price, serial killer, 40 caliber gun. He changed the gun the last time to the 9mm because he knew everybody was looking for a 40. And he had voices in his head. Again, voices. The son of Sam had voices in his head. Lame Price had voices in his head. He would get bad voices. He would walk into a store and he was upset with Arabs. This was after 9/11. He was going after the Arabs. Going after the Arabs. The only problem was, so the first victim was from Guatemala, right? The second victim was Arab. He was from Yemen, the guy from the 6-3. The third victim was a Russian Jew, and the final victim was also from like Guatemala or one of the the islands. He only had one Arab out of it, but he would get these voices, and he said sometimes he would see somebody and he would get these voices, but then he didn't have his gun, so he would have to go back with the gun, and maybe they weren't there, so he wasn't able to do it. So really crazy. So that was the one serial killer case.
So John, let me interrupt here now. Let me take a break a little bit into the chat. So Jimmy Kennedy, Brooklyn North Squad,
Sure.
Solid Detective, Jimmy Kennedy being one of them. He was a previous guest on the 10-4 Tavern. But I want to talk about something that's happening because, I'm in a 7-9. The 7-7 is literally across the border on Eastern Parkway, Atlantic Avenue. I'm sorry, on this side. And these things are happening, and I barely know about them unless there was a need to know. That's what I want our listeners to understand, how wild. And Mike, I really would love to hear you. Things were going on in the 7-5, in the 7-3, in Brooklyn North, in the 7-7, in the 7-9. And it's no, unless Tommy needs to know in the 7-9, unless, you know, Butch Nisi in the 8-1, if Joey Herbert in the 7-5, like, unless we find a connection, there's so much going on. Like, these things are happening in precincts that are 1, 2, 3 square miles that happen in cities all across the country. And that was that conversation I had with the lieutenant colonel from the New Jersey State Police Station, Spokane, Washington. Their entire city was the equivalent of one of our precincts. Yeah. And it's just wild. And so I just want to bring up Amazing Aunt, a great friend to the podcast, worked for Eric Dim in housing PSA 7, 1999 to the podcast. Salute to the bosses here. Thanks for sharing what policing was really like. God bless all who died in the line of duty. Never forget. I think she's talking about Irma Lozada. She was on there. And then I want to talk to you about the fact that Tony and Jeannie were working on this serial killer, but they are also an instrumental part of Mike's serial killer in the 7-9, Vincent Johnson, and the Brooklyn Strangler, who's got 7 girls under his travels. Maybe more. I'm sure there's more. I find it hard to believe there's only 7. Katrina Niles, he did not attribute to, which I can't believe that he didn't. But and then there was some interesting conversations with that previous homicide squad commander and Jay Kopp in the 9-0, because they had 5, we had 2. Yeah. And in the 9-0, and that was a whole interesting thing. And so what I'm saying is, like, it's fascinating. Like, we have 2 girls in the 7-9, 5 girls in the 9-0, and unless you really find those connected, these things are happening literally a short walk away from each other, and yet it's another world. So I don't think people really understand that. I don't think they understand it.
One of the things that leads into Tommy is, like, when I was the CO of the Homicide Squad, one of the things that I had to do was look at that and kind of coordinate that, make sure the 7-9 knows about this and whatever the connection is, and kind of be that person who maybe steered things in the right direction, but also was there to guide and to also deflect sometimes from up top. Let the detectives do the detective work. Okay? Let the detectives be detectives. And we always talk about technology. DNA always comes up, right? DNA. Oh, everybody, DNA. One of the best lines I ever heard was from the medical examiner. I can't think of his name off the top of my head, but he's given a presentation on DNA. And the first thing that he says is, remember this: DNA does not solve homicides. Detectives solve homicides. DNA provides the tools for the detective to solve the case. And that sometimes that gets forgotten or misinformed. The detective putting all of that together. One of the things that came up when we were doing the serial killer case is, Lame Price comes in and he ends up confessing to this. So a reporter wants to, says, oh, so in other words, he came in and he gave himself up. I says, whoa, stop right there. I don't like the way that sounds. Because if I walk into a precinct and say, that guy that got shot down the block? I did it. You did? Yes, I did. Well, tell us about it. I'm getting a lawyer. Can you arrest me? You got nothing. Mm-hmm. Unless the detective can put the case together, somebody coming in and saying, I did it, you've got to be able to prove that he did it or disprove it. People come in with all sorts of, crazy ideas. So, you can never diminish the work that the detective needs to do, whether it be knocking on doors, talking to people. You don't solve cases on a computer. You get information from a computer. But the other sign that I had hanging up that Frank Bowles told me about, and I hung up in my squads, Goyakod, Goyakod. And detectives, What is that? Get off your ass and knock on doors. That's how you solve cases. Police officer involved shooting in the 7-7. Mike, I don't know if you were the CO there. It was a early morning, like 8:15. All of a sudden, we got 10-13 shots fired, officer shots fired on, I think it might have been Sterling Place. Cop fired shots, perp is hit, gun is recovered. So now we have to put the case together. Now you got an MOS involved shooting. Is it a good shooting? So again, doing some canvases. One of the detectives who may be on this, maybe listening on this podcast, but like I said, I'm not going over names. They're doing a canvass and they're knocking on doors, and they get a woman whose window overlooks the street. And they said, did you see what happened? Come in here. Yes, she doesn't want to talk outside. I saw what happened. The police, they get out of the car. The guy had, I saw him point the gun at the police, and the officer shot him. And the next thing she says is, I don't know why the officer waited so long to shoot him. I'd have shot him a lot quicker than that.
I remember that.
Now, let me ask you a question. Can you get a better statement from a witness on a shooting involving a police officer than that? And how do you do it? By first-grade detectives doing a canvass. Not saying, I'm a first-grade detective. I don't knock on doors. Yes, you do. People in homicide know that. They knew the value of that. And it wasn't first grade is, we don't knock on doors. We don't canvass. Yes. And it's a good canvass, and that's why. And that's why you do it.
I tell you what, I felt that you guys, well, I learned a lot of things from you guys. Tommy, and you talk about not knowing what goes on from one command to another. I think in Brooklyn, SATCOM helped that a bit because we all worked for the same boss. We went to Comstat. I mean, you guys would pull me out of the fire sometimes. We all worked together. We all worked for the same boss. And I remember John, a couple of times, John, you made me feel like you were proud of me, and it made me happy because, I learned a lot from you guys. We went to Comstat once. I forget what happened, but somehow I think they were beating up the squad. I don't think you were I think you were in homicide then. But I got up and said, no, we know about that, and we're working together on that. And afterwards, I think everybody went to Tom's or something, and you said, I was so proud of you, that you did that. And there was another time you had a thing with crime scenes, they had to be pristine.
Yeah.
And
you can't reproduce it. Once you walk away from that crime scene, you lose it. But, and you don't know what value is. Listen, there's good, crime scene detectives. There's good detective investigators, and sometimes, they might miss something. So it was always good to, I would walk the scene with crime scene and have them recover stuff. And why do we recover it? There's a cigarette butt on the ground. I can't tell you how many cases. There's a handful of cases that came back to evidence recovered at the scene that could have been easily misled. Cigarette on the ground next to the victim. The victim doesn't smoke. Where'd that cigarette come from? Okay. Yeah. Well, we don't know whether the victim smokes or not at the time, but you know what? That's recover that. That might be useful.
Well, remember that
might have DNA. We might get DNA off of that.
But you hated when all the cops were all standing inside the crime scene. They shouldn't be, and you still see it today. Oh. Funny you say cigarette.
I threw you out of a crime scene once.
You did. You absolutely did. And
Minovich.
John Minovich.
But we
so you know what? This is a good segue because I want to get to Pete Fagusky for you guys. But you know what, Mike? You've been patient with us. Love to hear your perspective from the patrol side. And you and I know each other for 20-something years. We've talked about this endlessly. We talked about it today. Like your perspective on being, I don't want to say educated because I know but like exactly what you're leading into now with John throwing you out of the crime scene and then detectives. And you said in previous conversations, you said on the other call with like Phil Pulaski and just telling them, like, let the detectives do their thing. So I'd really love to hear right now from you, from the patrol perspective as a precinct commander, as a borough commander, on what the squad does and why some people think, oh, these guys think who the fuck they are,
Well-
and their pinky rings, John McCurry. And the way I always looked at it, we played hard, but we also worked hard when the bell rang. So a little bit of that, and then from your perspective, then let's get into, because I know you both share Pete Fagasti in the 7-5, and it's 9:09. We're running late. Overtime slips will all be approved. We're at 540 active listeners, which is fantastic, especially considering the technical hiccups we have tonight. So thank you, everybody, for showing up. Really appreciate it. Like, subscribe, and share, please. But Mike, the patrol perspective on the bureau, on the squad.
Well, that's what you learn. You have to. The patrol people have to be, what can I do for you, kind of thing with the squad. Because, like I said, with the crime scene, now John actually caused the cop to get a beating, because we talked about that serial guy killing the shooting what he thought were the Arab guys. Remember the one was on Atlantic Avenue on the north side of Atlantic? Mm-hmm. Well, I went there that night. I responded, and there's a cop, number one, in the crime scene, which after you threw me out, I know we weren't supposed to do that anymore. And what does he do? He flicks his cigarette in the crime scene. Yeah. So I start like, asshole John's gonna have to fucking send out for DNA, and it's gonna take. But you make sense. Like you shouldn't be in the crime scene. Why do we all feel the need to stand inside the crime scene tape? I mean, you're screwing up a crime scene.
Yeah.
Well, we went on one when there was a shooting one time. I don't know what it was. I think you were in homicide. I don't know where I was at the time. And I go and I start throwing people out of the crime scene. What are you doing? Get out, get out, get out. I'm yelling at the cop. You get everybody's name, put them on a pad. They're all going to have to get printed. And there you were standing there staring at me, looking just like nodding, like you were so proud. It felt like the little boy that grew up. You were so proud of me. But it's what can I do for you? Like you guys helped me. we do 250s, whatever we're looking for patterns. I bring them to you guys. You put it all together for me. What can I do for you in the crime scene? If there are people there, they wouldn't talk to us too much to the uniform, but you just get a name and you walk over to the squad and that's right. The white shirt party, Ronnie. Assholes. Fucking niggas.
There was always, we'd have to deal with that. I would have to deal with that. Like, well, I'm the borough, I'm an inspector. But you have to stay out of the crime scene. We're not done with after the crime scene. We had a double homicide in the 9-0. It was in an apartment. So it's very easy to preserve an apartment crime scene, right? At the front door, nobody comes in. It's all preserved, waiting for crime scene. There's a body in the kitchen and a body in a bedroom, and a white shirt comes up, and he says, I have to come into the crime scene. I said, why? I have to see the bodies. I said, do you think I'm making this up?
Yeah.
And he looked at me, and I said, we're waiting for crime scene and the ME. You can't come into the crime scene right now. Like, there's two bodies. I'll show you pictures, and when we're done, you can come in. But what do you mean? Like, I have to see the bodies because I'm an inspector. Like, no,
Because I want to leave my footprints in the blood.
Yeah, right.
So John, let me just. So Tom Coomey taught me. He's like, and again, I'm a young sergeant in the bureau, and I'm like, how do I control these crime scenes? And Tom Coomey, for anyone who knows, was a HFL Housing for Life guy. He came over in the merger, and he was from the West Coast. We used to call him the left coaster. And he used to knock on people's door and say, hi, it's me, Tom Coomey from the precinct. I'm from the detective squad. He was so California. It was so funny, but he was also very strong. And he said to me, Tommy, just get a piece of paper and have people write it out and get a Polaroid photo and show all the people who think they have the authority to enter the crime scene. Here's the photo. Sign your name that you're entering. And as soon as you ask them to sign their name that they're entering the crime scene, they would turn around and walk off. Yeah. So we called it the white shirt repellent.
Yeah.
Because as soon as you ask them to sign their name to enter the crime scene, no problem. You can go, Chief. no problem. Just sign your name here that you entered the crime scene. They're like,
Yeah.
I'll take a picture. I'll look at the Polaroid and I'll be on my way. So yeah, it's an old problem. I'm sure it still exists.
I think that we, at least a lot in SATCOM, and those of us that knew each other, I think we all worked together pretty good because we all tried to understand what everybody else. Listen, you guys would come down on Monday morning for my meetings. You know, the crime, and we'd look at stuff, and everybody, what do you think we need to do? Let's do this, let's do this. Everybody worked to strategize together. I kind of started understanding what you guys needed, what you needed from my guys, what we needed to do, you know, to set you up when you got there. I mean, I never knew. I remember one and this is before all the technology, in the 7-3 was two detectives, they're both retired now. John Giretti and Charlie Corolla.
Sure.
And I think Big John has passed away also.
I think so, yeah.
Yeah, and you know, there was a shooting in the middle of the night, and I used to go wake them up. They gave me the keys to the dorm. I was a sergeant because sometimes homicide couldn't get in. They'd rather me wake them up anyway. They'd get overtime, and then they start the case, and they carry the case. They keep going with it rather than pick it up in the morning. And we go out, and the guy's shot all the way up at the north end, up Saratoga way up by Broadway. And there's nothing but a dead guy in a sneaker. That's it. It's 3 o'clock in the morning. And within like an hour and a half, they had the whole damn story. There was nobody out there. There was a dead guy, a sneaker, a couple of shells on the ground, and that was it. And in the 7-7, John, I would go up there. You know, I'd go up and listen, and your guys worked together. I mean, I remember Smitty had all those files he used to keep. Smitty had a whole bunch of files on every case he ever worked or whatever, and somebody else would have a homicide, and Bobby Rivera and Smitty would get together and they'd give this guy, could be this, and they'd all start working together. And before you know it, boom, the whole thing was done. But there was things that we had to do on patrol. I had to understand what you guys needed, and it wasn't giving you shit. It was, what can I do for you? What do you need? And you know what? If you tell me go get coffee, or go get coffee, whatever it was.
We worked very well together with the 7-7 patrol. You know, we had a homicide in a basement of a vacant building off of probably Sterling and Rochester, maybe. But you know, dead body, and it looks like people would go down there and they would use it to shoot up. It was rigged up electric, running the wires, so people were in and out of there, but we didn't know exactly who. And you had your SNU team, and I forget what you had. Who were your uniform? What was the uniform team when they come out of the academy? What was his name? You had a sergeant. You had a really good, aggressive sergeant. So we told them, listen, we need to talk to people. And they would go out there every night for 4 days, and they would round up people who were spitting, who were smoking weed, before it was legal, and bring them into the precinct.
That's what we did.
And you would debrief, and we would talk to them, and we would debrief them. And some of the detectives, you had to push, like, oh, they're bringing, another guy we got to debrief. Yeah, but I had guys like John Barber, Freddie Neglia, Bobby Rivera.
Oh boy,
good interviewers, and they would talk to these people. And eventually, it was like policing 101. Your guys, a guy stops them and says to your sergeant, you guys are killing us out here. Listen, I'll tell you what happened. I'll tell you who you got. You got to go after this one and this one, but you're killing us. All right.
Yeah.
So now we got 2 names. Now we pick them up, and then we start talking to them, and we end up solving a homicide from policing 101.
Yeah, you guys
were
for a while. You guys were debriefing every prisoner that came through. Yeah. I know it was a pain in the ass for you guys up there, but everybody worked together.
Yeah.
You know what? Wow. Remember we had all that overtime, that OTB overtime or something. I had modules of it every week. I used to manage that myself. Well, John Menovich would help me too. John did a lot of it, but I looked at all of it. Otherwise, all the idiots would get it. I had so much, I said, well, let me give some to the squad, because maybe they want to make some overtime too. We're all on the same team. And everybody said, no, don't give it. Those guys aren't going to be there. They're not going to do it. They're going to screw you. Those guys, your older guys, put on those uniforms, went out there, were on post all night, cold, rain.
Yeah.
They wrote summonses, they made collars, they were out there, and they were getting information too while they were out there. You know, I mean,
So one of the first things.
John, hold on. I just want to talk about debriefings. I thought the best time was when every prisoner got debriefed, and it was a pain in the ass.
Yeah.
It was a pain in the ass, and patrol hated it, and the squad hated it. But if it was done right, it was massive. I'll leave it at that. It's hold on, guys. I'm sorry. I got to moderate. I got to be a jag off. It's 9:20. We're running late, but we're going to stay. Overtime slips are going to be approved. We got to get to Pete. We got to get to the 7-5. We got to get to Brooklyn North Homicide. John, you'll come back. Mike, you come back. No problem. We'll keep it going. We're at 571 live viewers right now. It's awesome, but let's do Pete because I know you want to do it. You both have a connection to Pete, so let's do Pete. I'm sorry to break up the stories. We could do this for hours and hours, and I apologize, guys.
What a great guy he was.
Yeah, December 12th, 2011. So I get a phone call at home on my cell phone. You know, my phone, I would get all sorts of phone calls, but the phone call you never want to get is, John, we got a police officer shot in the 7-5. All right. So I make a couple of phone calls to my team that's coming in the morning. Let's get some detectives to the scene. And I head over to the scene. And when I get there, there's a 7-5 squad detective standing on the top stoop of this building. And I said, how's it look? He goes, it's not good. You know, it's not going to make it. So we have a homicide of a police officer. 2:30 in the morning, I think it was on Pine Street. They get a radio run for a burglary. So the basement, it was a low-level weed dealer, and you know, so we had some money. And the person upstairs hears this, you know, scuffle going on downstairs. They call 911. I think there's a burglary going on in the building. Pete arrives with his partner,
Bert.
it was Glenn Estrada, right?
Oh, he wasn't with Bert anymore?
No, he's with Glenn Estrada.
Okay.
That night, I think that somebody he might have been filling in for his regular partner. And they go there, they go in, and as they're going down the steps into the basement apartment,
Under the stoop,
Herb comes running out. He's got a gun. He runs into Pete, fires a shot, shoots him, gets him in the face, in the head, takes off. Estrada grabs the other perp that was in the building, but when the shots go off and Pete is shot, he lets go of that perp and he chases after the shooter. And he did some foot chase, and he grabs him. He ends up catching the shooter. He threw the shooter threw the gun underneath the parked car. The gun is recovered. The shooter is apprehended, and now we're looking for other perps, and you know the race is on. Within 5 days, we were able to apprehend 5 people. We had indictments returned on all 5 perps for the shooting and killing of Pete Figoski. There was not a bad thing that anybody could say about Pete.
No.
He was just a model cop. He worked midnights. He wanted to work midnights because he had because of family obligations. We had to have it's terrible. We had a helicopter fly up. One of his daughters was in college upstate to bring her home.
He had 3 or 4. He had 3 or 4 daughters.
Yeah.
And let me tell you what. I mean, look, I didn't always have great times in the 7-5. I had some philosophical differences with some of the people there. But
what do you mean, Mike? What do you mean?
But Pete.
All right, another time. Let's do Pete.
Well, because he was. There was a couple guys there. There was another guy named Pete also that had passed away when I first got there. He was
Bobby Healy was a midnight guy forever in the 7-5.
Well, Pete, I knew Pete was a more mature guy. I'm not going to say older, but he was mature. He was professional. He was quiet. he really did his job. Just never said much. He was one of those guys where you would say, Pete, what do you want? Pete, what do you want? You're doing this a long time. You do a good job. Come on, it's time to. He had 3 or 4 girls, I think.
Yeah.
And nothing. Pete, come on? Let me do something for you, for Christ's sakes. What the hell's the point of attaining rank if you can't take care of the people that deserve it?
Yeah.
He didn't want anything. No, I'm fine. And just humble, non-assuming, competent. Just
He did his job. You know what? He did his job. Yeah.
he did a lot more than that. And he led by like quiet example. He wasn't a big mouth. He wasn't tough guy. I mean, he could roll when it came time to roll, but you wouldn't know it. He was a real good guy. That was a shame. Yeah. Well, most guys that do, most people that do midnights do them for a reason, but that doesn't mean that they do it well. Pete did it well.
We did.
So
we
what
wrapped
you
that
guys-
up in 5 days.
Yeah, well, amazing work. I'm not surprised by the squad, 7-5 squad, Brooklyn North Homicide. Because when the bell rings,
I always said that.
I've always felt that those guys would never, ever, ever. Now, I'm going to bring George in any minute now. So, George, start getting ready. I know you're hanging out in the back. But a little side story that you guys probably don't know. My best friend in the world, UB Perez. John, you know UB Perez from the Transit Police.
Sure.
Our kids grew up together. I coached Little League with him, with his son Chris and my son Tommy. Chris sells public safety technology today with Skydio. He's a sales rep. He's doing great. He's going to be a CEO one day. My son is a cop in DC. Who the hell knows what he's going to do? He's got aspirations. But those 2 kids were UB Perez and myself. UB Perez's sister, Concha, was married to Pete's brother.
Oh, wow.
And and so, here I am retired and this happens and UB calls me up and he's like, oh my God, did you hear? And I was like, yeah. And I did. And he goes, do you know the connection I have? And this UB's my best friend in the world. And so it was devastating for us through UB, through his friends. And so my point is to everybody who's listening is this police family goes deep because there's a lot of family like John's family and his father was a cop and our kids, my kids are cops and all my little leaguers and all my baseball players are now cops, detectives and sergeants even. One of them's a sergeant right now. This stuff runs deep through our veins and it means a lot. And I couldn't be more honored to be part of this family. So Mike, John, thank you very much. Any final thoughts? I'm going to bring George in. George, I don't know if you were involved, but here comes George Farback, Brooklyn North Welfare Officer, DEA. So you've got a chance to listen. You've kind of knocked back a few. So let her rip, George. You've heard all stories.
If you leave me standing at the bar, the less sense I tend to make. But, one of the points I do have to make listening, what stopped the disconnect between the precinct commander and the squad was CompStat.
Yes.
Because prior to that, nobody asked any of the precinct commander, hey, what's going on in your command?
Yeah, of course.
All of a sudden, the CompStat, and now the precinct commander said, whoa, wait a minute. I got the squad upstairs. I can ask them to get more involved. And that's when I saw it, that the connection between the CO and patrol, that's where it really came together.
Well, it was a matter.
Some of the CompStat is great, and there's nothing like it. And Jack Maple was just a phenomenal mind for policing. But what I saw happening was, and I'm going to oversimplify it by saying you had non-crime fighter administrators put in position in charge of precincts, And what they were looking at was numbers. So they didn't really know or were concerned about actually solving the crime, but they wanted to make sure that it looked good when they were at Comstat. So how do you make it look good? Well, I can go in and say we had a lot. We wrote 150 summonses and we wrote 85 250s and we made 6 arrests. Yeah, but you got no information from anything. And when it started to become numbers driven, it got skewed. That's what I saw. Mike, I don't know if you believe or can understand what I'm saying.
I know exactly
No?
I know exactly what you're talking about. That's one of the reasons. One of the reasons we lost the 250 lawsuit.
Yeah.
Now, see, we were different. We worked together. It was a matter of, well, number one, we worked all for the same guy. We worked for Espo. And how many times do you hear him say, "I don't want numbers for numbers. You're doing the shit over here, but the crime's over here.
Yeah.
I don't want that."
Right.
But we worked together. We had a common interest was to solve the problems, make the neighborhood better.
Yeah.
It wasn't about me looking good or you looking good. We were doing our job.
Yeah.
And we realized that
we had a common objective.
It's a symbiotic relationship.
Yeah. I mean, you're talking about 250s. I could remember, we would have conversations where I would sit down with you and your lieutenants and like, Mike, we get the 250s and we're reading them. You got to train your guys. You can't submit 250s like this. You can't put on a 250 that you stopped the person because he was loitering. Guess what? That's not a crime. You can't. And now you're putting on paper that you did something that you weren't supposed to do. You've got to, if you got to make sure that you're doing it for the right reason in the right location and you're documenting it properly.
And one of the reasons we lost the lawsuit. So you have your SNU team going out, and then what do? You're up in the OP, right? And you see your hand-to-hands. And if you stop a guy and he's got drugs, you put cuffs on him. If he doesn't have drugs, you do a 250 to cover your ass. You see a guy walking down the street, and you see what may be a gun. It's not. If it's in his hand, you don't need a 250. He's under.
Right.
You see a bulge. It's a gun. They don't do the 250. So, like I had all of our SNU guys make 250s. Whether you made the collar or not, you're doing a 250.
Yeah.
Because now when you go down to court, when the federal judge looked at that, Shinlin was the lady, what she sees is you gave out 10,000 250s, but you only have 200 collars. But in reality, if you did it right, you probably have a 40% arrest to stop ratio, 50%. Because we got lazy.
Right.
People get lazy. They just do it to get a number, John.
Yeah.
I saw.
Well, that was the problem.
Go ahead, Joseph.
When they put it on the activity, on your monthly activity log, the 250s.
Well,
then all of a sudden it was like, let me get 20 of them.
Well, we did a thing in the 7-3. We had a burglary pattern down the East End by Flatbush Avenue. And they were doing day tour burglaries. They were, a lot of pioneers were moving in. The kids were taking electronics. They were going in and taking electronics. So we put uniform out there. And then we all came up with this together. The squad, everybody sat together. We put uniform out there during the daytime. Most burglaries happen during the daytime, right? Resident. Well, they got to leave at 2:15 to get back to command. And then we would put the anti-crime guys out, the plainclothes guys, between 2:15 and 4. And everyone that they saw that looked like they're carrying a backpack or pushing a cart, you try to get their name. The squad would run all the names for us. And then you'd see, holy shit, this guy doesn't even live there, and he's been arrested 4 times for burglary. So within 2 or 3 weeks, we made the college. We got the whole little crew. Well, we went to Comstat. And Espo asked how it happened, and we all get up, the squad, and everybody would tell them what we did. And that's what says, see, that's what you're supposed to do. That's how you're supposed to do the 250s. Well, as John said, the administrative people, that I want to look good too. I need a lot of 250s. That's not what Espo said.
Yeah, exactly.
You do it for a reason.
Yeah.
Next thing, that's right, killing trees in 1623.
Yeah.
Next thing you know, I heard a captain telling my guys, he was one of my captains, I want you everybody you stop, I don't care if you say good morning, doing a 250 because I want to look good. I had to grab him, tell
No.
But it can it be a performance indicator if you're doing it for the right reason? But if you perceive it as it's going to catapult you to get promoted or something, you're out of your fucking mind. It's got to be for a reason.
Exactly.
Yeah. So George, from the union perspective, and we talked about SATCOM and the difference between SATCOM from mid '90s to when they finally broke it up in 2006 or 7, like the pressure and talking to the squad commander, like you talked about. Like I talked to the precinct commander, the narcotics commander. The three of us coordinated. We went to Comstat. John Cornicello. John, did we not go to Comstat? And then when they didn't call us when we thought we were up, didn't we not get pissed off?
Yeah.
Like,
you were all ready for it.
We were like, what are you fucking doing? And so my question is, George, how did the detectives perceive it? Because you being a delegate and a detective in the squad, a senior detective in the squad, how did you perceive it in '95? And then how did you perceive it in later years as we finally evolved to a symbiotic and really a well-churned machine? And I thought it was great when I left in 2006.
Well, and initially, so Bobby Boyce is the squad commander, and he comes back and he starts breaking balls on cases. And I push back a little bit. And he's like, you know what? Fuck you. I got to go to Comstat next Monday. You're going to be here at 4:30 in the morning. We're going to Comstat together. You're going to watch this. And I sat there in awe. I was like, you got to be kidding me. This is the crap that you people are going through. And it was pre-ESPO getting involved when he actually controlled it a little bit and said, listen, we're not trying to make an ass out of everybody. We're trying to help. And then I said, wow, this is fairly impressive that they're torturing you guys like this. And I was surprised that you and Lieutenant Cornicello just said, well, we got pissed if we didn't get called. Because I remember
we were
nobody wanted to get called.
Yeah.
They were sitting there in a panic. Don't call me.
Comstat was a way of exchanging information and even like training. But what was funny? Like you would see things like in the Manhattan North Comstat, there was some kind of a homicide, and one of the things that they did was they got the plate numbers of the cars that were parked on the street, and they worked that whole thing, Detective 101, right? So now all of a sudden you're at another Comstat, and someone would ask, "Did you get the plate numbers?" Like it had nothing to do with what we had, what we would, but they heard plate number. Oh, we got to get plate number. So you got to make sure. I had a captain say, make sure you got plate number DD5 in the folder. Why? It has nothing to do with cars and plate numbers. But he heard that was a good thing to do.
Well, there was a chief of detectives that I ran into at a crime scene in the Tompkins houses, and came up to me and said, "Hey, did you get all the plate?" And we knew it was the guys in the projects. Right. And I was like, geez, this guy didn't drive here. He lives here. Right. No, you got to get all the plate numbers. You got to go back. You got to run all the plate numbers. That was 4 hours of work.
Because now they're just checking boxes for no reason at all.
Exactly.
And that's what you're talking about with the 250s. Yeah. That's what John was talking about when he had to grab me and pull my coat and say, "You guys are doing some bogus reports. This doesn't help anybody." First of all, they got to run every friggin' 250. So if you give them 10,000 bullshit 250s, you're really tying them up doing busy work. And it doesn't, and it's counterproductive. It doesn't make sense. And if you get called on it, you're going to stand there with your thumb up your ass. Because there's no reason. I remember commanders going up there and, man, they didn't know what the hell was going on. I would ask for them to be moved because I get yelled at, and then I wanted to get them transferred, but they wouldn't transfer them. Certain people couldn't be messed with. They
when done properly, it's a great tool for the detective. If you got a shooting at Nostrand and Sterling, and you can go back to a folder and pull all the 250s of people that got stopped, at Nostrand and Sterling and now have some sort of a base to work with.
We kept our own.
That's what it was intended for.
Yeah, we kept our
Not
own
everybody
database.
understood that, you know.
No, we kept our own database. Yeah, we knew. Yeah. But
Yeah, I know for a fact that we solved the non-fatal shooting, George. You were probably involved in it, for a UF 250 stop, question, and possibly frisk. For those who are not NYPD centric, active, retired, or even peripherally involved in New York City, what the rest of the country called field investigative reports, we called UF 250s. They were stop, question, possibly frisk, not stop, question, frisk, because not everyone got frisked. That's the lie that they perpetrated on you. Those UF 250s were gold. They were legal. US v. Terry 1967 is the constitutional right to do that. And they are investigative gold because the same people hang out in the same corners and do the same things and do the same dirt all the time. Go watch The Wire if you don't believe us on these podcasts. Go watch The Wire because they're pretty darn close. Not exact, but close. And we solved shootings for sure. And I have one in particular. If I had more time to think about it, I could come up with the names and the addresses. But they are good. And the only reason politicians would ever go after UF 250s, stop, question, and frisk, Terry stops, whatever you want to call them, is because they hate and they want to create chaos and they want to create dissension because they do not want the good, hardworking people to be safe. They want to create chaos because these communities deserve better. Everybody has a God-given right to live peaceably. So with that, 941, 667 people are currently active and online right now. Tremendous. Really appreciate it. So, Mike, I really want to hear from you on the final, and then we'll go to George, and then final John, because it's John's episode. We only touched on half of John's episode of his career that we should have, so we'll definitely get him back in the spring, early in the year, because we're booking up until March. But like Mike, you've shared with me so much feelings about never being in the bureau, but coming to appreciate it. And George, John, and I being bureau guys, we really appreciate your journey from patrol and like recognizing over the course of your journey in your career what the bureau and the detectives do. So please feel free. This is your time.
well, look, they're grown guys. I will say one thing. I've said this to chiefs of detectives. I've said it to guys that didn't understand. They're probably the best in the world. When the bell rings, they answer it. I've never seen them not get their guy, ever. And I've seen them, everybody's got downtime and everybody does what they do, maybe the weekends. And I know John didn't like it, but sometimes they wouldn't have a tie on in the morning, you know. John would come up and straighten them out. You sent somebody home. You sent one of your guys home, John, from homicide, because he came in without a tie on a Sunday.
No, he didn't.
He did so. He sent
No,
him
he
home.
didn't.
I remember.
No,
Yes, he did.
No, so there was a homicide it was a Saturday, and there was a picture showed up in the newspaper of the homicide scene, and who's in there but my sergeant at the scene, and he doesn't have a tie on.
Oh boy.
They cut that picture out and made photocopies. When I came in on Monday morning, there must have been 50 copies of that picture on my desk.
Well,
Yeah.
I
Well,
remember you. I don't know if they got him home. Or went to a
don't go bring us down rabbit holes, Mike. You took John. He's the haberdashery guy. He wears hats. He wears overcoats. He wears ties. Like, just again, your perspective from patrol on the bureau, because
best. I think that they're the best detectives in the world. I've never seen them not get their guy, and I don't care what they're doing. When the bell rings, boom, they're on their game. and they always go out and get the guy. I know they helped me with a lot of stuff, and again, getting their perspective. These are experienced guys, and I thought they were a huge part of the team. Taught me an awful lot. Taught me an awful lot about a lot of things, and not even just the bosses, the Gold Shield detectives too, and the union guys would teach me, you got to be careful what you say. You're a chief, people listen, you got to be very careful. You say something and people tend to listen and it hurts people. Just shut your mouth sometimes, which I think was one of the lieutenant union guys told me, I believe. But I'm actually, it's one of my regrets that I never got to work in the squad, because the more I learned about it, the more interesting it became. And they did magic stuff. Like I said, a body and a sneaker and 2 rounds at 3:30 in the morning, 2 shells. That's it. Nothing. Not even a stray dog. An hour and a half later, they had the whole story. They couldn't prove it yet, but they had the whole story. And they did this all the time on a daily basis.
Yeah. So, Mike, your voice, I'm just going to say that someone shared with me today that your voice is so calm and cool and collected. It's like ASMR right now. They want to go to sleep with your voice and just like this smooth conversation. So that's really, but that's not the Mike Marino I know, which is really funny.
This is my 9/11 to Tommy, my voice.
All right. So George, I'm going to go to you. To Mike's point, I always, once I really understood and really got engulfed into the Detective Bureau, my analogy of the Detective Bureau of the New York City Police Department, I'm sure it's across the country, is the St. Patrick's Day Parade. All the uniforms walk up in front. The crowd cheers you on in your uniform, and they love you and they appreciate you. And then the sanitation cleans up the shit on the back end. And that's the Detective Bureau in the New York City Police Department, probably every other police department. Because when shit's going sideways and shit is really bad, and it's really bad for publicity and politics and all that stuff, that the detectives always made it right. And they solved it. To Mike's point, they always got their guy. Maybe it was a gal, but most likely it was a guy. And so from a union perspective, and as a first grade detective in the New York City Police Department, like, I certainly appreciated everything that you guys did. And I always marveled looking through you guys through the interview glass and saying, man, these guys are just pulling shit out of their ass, and how are they getting it? And you're getting someone who's reluctant to tell you something, to tell you what they need to tell you. John, I'm going to go to Tommy Burks. Like, you got the 2 points, right? So say that when you get the chance. But like, man, they pulled miracles. And the one I'm going to tell you is Bernie Kerrick calling me up when Chris Gandol had the mom and the baby killed in the tub on Halsey Street. And the public was saying, we could have saved them, and the cops didn't respond, and they did it. And I needed you and Kevin Slag to get the right statement from the person who was blaming the cops for not doing their job. But in reality, that mom and baby was dead long before that guy got there. And so I don't know if you remember that case, and I can give you the details. But like, I always knew, to Mike's point, I always knew that we would get to the truth and get where we needed to get and ice it out. So George, final thoughts on that statement and all that you guys have done. And we're going to go to John because it's his show, and then we're going to wrap up.
Well, just real quick too, because everybody that's on here right now always worked in the ghetto. So you get, I think, your better detectives. And if they're not great when they get there, they're going to be great after being there. Because guess what? You know what? I mean, I know guys I worked with in narcotics. One guy that comes to mind worked in the 17th Squad, was there for 12 years, never caught a murder. I was like, big guy. I caught 3 in one day.
Yeah.
So you just get better and I think the breed of detective that you get in those precincts, they know how to work. They know how to talk to the public. They know how to get people to talk to them. So, and to the chief, I always found that there was always a better relationship with the CO if the CO at some point was a cop. And I know some of the chiefs' history, 2873, and some of the other COs and bosses that I worked for were truly cops. So there's always a better relationship with the detective squad. I think when the CO kind of, hey, listen, guys, I've been there. I know what the deal is. I walked that foot post. Whatever. So I think, like you said, I think some of the better detectives, some of the best detectives come out of some of the shittier precincts. But you have to. And sometimes some guys don't fit in. But I think the majority of guys, we will get them to that point. And I think Lieutenant Cornicello, I think he knows, with the people. And Tom, you said it once before to me that we always talked about who you were thinking about picking up. And Lieutenant Cornicello used to do the same thing with me. He would call me and say, George, you know what I'm thinking about? And I would get input from the guys in the other teams. Hey, is this guy good? Blah, blah, blah. And it was just a kind of, let's go back and forth and make sure we make the right pick. So we have a team guy, a guy that's going to fit in, and a guy that's a good detective.
Yeah.
So, yes, but like I said, to all three people that I have called boss over the 35 years, thank you, Tommy. Thank you for letting me jump in, and I'll jump in anytime. And
well, George, we're going to have you back because we got a lot of legacy folks that everybody from our era for sure. So it's great to have you. And then we'll if you'll have us, we'll do one on you and some of the capers that you did. And I know Mike O'Keefe, who was our second guest, thinks the world of you. And so you might even be one of his characters in his books.
Well, I am in one of his books, but yeah.
Yeah. But I want to say something that you just talked about. And before I get to John, and John, I'm sorry for derailing, but can you imagine a profession where you're a manager, say a sergeant, or a director as a lieutenant, or a VP as a captain? Like, I'm making an analogy in career. They all get to interview their people and pick who they want to work for them. This is the only fucking career that they force people down your throat. And you got to deal with who you got to deal with. So when you talk about skills of a manager and being able to get people to do and follow the objective and the mission and the strategy that's put forth, and what do we want to accomplish? What are our objectives? And you're just fucking handed shitbirds, and you got to deal with them. Like, think about the skill set of a union delegate, George, because we're working together on this, right? Because you're modulating the squad. We're like, come on, guys, we all got to get along. And then as a sergeant or a lieutenant or a captain, like, you get who you get. You don't get to interview them. Right. You don't get to pick who comes to you. So I'm just going to leave it on that. And then, John, this is your career tonight. We touched on it. We didn't get to all of it. I hope you had a great time. Final thoughts, things, anything you want, and then you could tease up another episode.
So, Tommy, just to go off of what you just said about squads, and, you get who you get. I've always said that the most realistic police show on TV was Barney Miller.
Yes.
Every person in that show could be identified in any squad room that you walk into in the city. George, am I wrong? Right? No matter, you could find, every squad has that person. You got the person who's really good administrative. You got the guy who dresses the part, but he can't put handcuffs on anybody. And the whole way, the whole idea of getting them to work together is really what we did. Homicides are not solved alone. On Kojak, he solves everything by himself and he just tells everybody what to do. But the fact of the matter is that you need a team working together. And I found that what my job was not to be the smartest investigator in the squad. I never claimed to be the smartest investigator in the squad, but you need to like oversee and kind of keep things working in the right direction. You're constantly learning from each other. You know, if you think that you're the smartest person and you're not going to learn from anybody, from the newest person who walks in the room, you're out of luck. You're constantly learning. So trying to keep the investigation focused and let the detectives do the detecting work. And I would run interference with the DA's office, with the chiefs, you know, with the media, you know, and just try to keep things on track. You know, George, another thing that you said is very often we'd be working on a case and we'd be out in the you know, knocking on doors, whether it's in a housing development or a residential area, and you would look around and say, the detectives working this case, I feel, care more about investigating and solving this case than sometimes the family and friends of the victim do.
Absolutely.
You know? And the whole, you know, the you know, Vernon Gebbet, we work for God. You know, we would be working cases, and the family. You know, I remember we're investigating a 15-year-old gets killed in one of the projects, the 7-9, and we're talking to the family. They know what happened and what was going on, and what we get from them was, you know, we're from the streets. We don't talk to the police.
Yeah, there you go.
You know,
Right.
and I've got a squad working on solving. The 15-year-old got killed. He's dead. But they're not going to talk to the police because we don't talk to the police. You know, we cared, and sometimes we cared more than some of the other people that you thought should care. You know, and I go back to what I said in the beginning. Our goal, you know, we make things right. That's what the detectives do. We make things right, whether it's the prisoner that escaped out of the precinct, whether we're investigating a homicide, we're investigating a non-fatal shooting, or somebody lost their phone or a credit card. We make things right. And I'm going to go back to what you alluded to, Tommy. My first day in detective investigation school. I'm a young white shield going into the detective bureau in the Transit Police Department. And Tommy Burke, one of the best investigators that I know, one of the best sergeants that I've ever had the privilege of knowing and working for, tells us, I'm going to give you guys the secret to being a detective.
Yep.
Oh, you get the secret. There's a whole secret here. The secret of being a detective is to get someone to tell you what happened. And the second part of that is act on that information that you get.
Yep.
That when somebody tells you the guy who shot him is waiting for a bus on the corner of Atlantic and Nostrand, then get your ass over to Atlantic and Nostrand and get that guy.
Yep.
You know, and you have to get somebody to tell you what happened. And when you keep that in mind, that leads you to your whole working as a detective, that, you know, you don't just bully people. You know, you need to develop relationships. It's those debriefings that you did 3 weeks ago when you developed somebody who you kind of got a little bit of a rapport with, and they're a street person, but guess what? That's where you get your information from. And you get somebody to talk to you, and that's the big secret of being a detective.
Yes, sir.
And the hardest thing to do, and this is, I'm going to end up with this, the hardest thing to do is to sit in front of a person that just killed a cop, and you know that you got to get a statement from them, and you're going to give them a soda, you're going to buy them a hamburger, French fries, you're going to be their pal.
Yep.
And everybody outside that door wants to come in there and pound them to the ground. But you know that your job, if you're going to do this right, to make this right, they killed a cop, I got to get a statement from them. And you do what you have to do to get that statement. And that's what a detective does.
Yep.
He put that aside. And it's not easy to do, okay? And I've done and seen it done. And you walk out of there afterwards, and you have to just feel good knowing that I'm putting them away to jail. And that's
Yeah.
what
I went to the CIC course and I talked to the detectives and I met with them on the Eddie Byrne case, and that's exactly what they said.
Yep.
They said because the detective said because we fed those prisoners and we gave them cigarettes, that we were fucking chastised for weeks and weeks and months. And they said, how could you treat those fucking guys the way you did? Because they just killed Eddie, blah, blah, blah. And it's like, you don't understand. This process is exhausted at the end of the final appeal of Supreme Court. And you don't understand. It's not about just today. And so, amen to that. I'm going to give you that. I'm not going to go down. So we got super chats. Dr. DJ DJVR 999, Minister of Investigation. Little nod to you, whoever that is. Thank you. Appreciate that. And then he's got the certificate, the Minister of Investigation.
Minister of Investigation.
That was coined in the I want to say it was Mark.
Mark
there you
Poirier.
Go.
I don't know if you
Mark Poirier. That's a Mark Poirier. Loud.
Yeah.
God bless him. Rest in peace, Mark Poirier. Amazing Ant, 1999 to the podcast. We called this out before, but salute to the bosses. Thanks for sharing. God bless all who died in the line of duty, never forgotten. So we got those tonight. So Pete, we missed you tonight. You're on vacation, cruising around the Caribbean, probably in Belize or somewhere. But Pete is a really great friend of mine and my podcast partner. He wrote the book, The Deadly Path, which is the whistleblower's version, his journey of telling how corrupt the government was in the Fast and Furious business. It is available. His book, The Deadly Path, is available on Amazon, Google Books, Simon & Schuster, Barnes & Noble, and Modern Samurai. Hold on. I'm going to do this. Yep. Modern Samurai, thanks, $20. Great show tonight, guys. The level of experience in the room, amazing. Really appreciate that. And then we got the Sal Greco show every Tuesday and Thursday, 1:05 p.m. Eastern. And then our channel, YouTube, Finest Unfiltered, 10-4 Tavern. Pete and I are on LinkedIn, Instagram, Facebook, all the same bullshit, social media channels. Who gives a shit, whatever. We're just talking. Just so everybody knows, our goal is to tell the stories that need to be told. The profession is taking a hit. The vocation is taking a hit. It shouldn't be. It's the most noble profession, in my opinion, in the world. I'm sure my colleagues on this channel right now who are live and active will agree. Nothing better in the world, nothing better rewarding, and not one cop that I ever met worth a shit would ever say they would do anything different ever again. So with that, stay on, you guys, for the after, but I'm going to do an outro, and we're out. 3 hours in, a little short, 780 viewers, guys. 780 viewers right now. Thank you. Appreciate it. Guys, stay on. We'll talk after.
I'm here.